Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 421. Jun Moxie fights Xiao Buyu. Jun Xie was giving full vent to the 10 years of accumulated grief and resentment at this moment. He attacked with punches after punches. And the cruel sound of his opponent's body being hit seemed like the most beautiful music to Jun Xie's ears. Xiao didn't wish to insta-kill Jun Xie with his sword. He wanted to torture the Supreme Commander in a slow and dragged-out manner. Similarly, Jun Xie didn't wish to leave Xiao alone either. Moreover, he didn't even desire to crush the man's skull with his fists very quickly. And that's because that would be too easy a death for him. 10 years of hatred. Eldest brother and second brother had died because of him. The 2 younger nephews are also dead. Elder sister-in-law lies far away in a coma. The old man has seen so many of his progeny die before his eyes. He's so old. And yet he's striving to keep the Jun family from the verge of a collapse. The once flourishing Jun family was on the decline. It's like a mountain of hatred, a sea of hatred. And this man is the root cause of that hatred. How can Xiao death offset so much hatred? Wouldn't it be too easy a way out for him? Jun Xie had never felt hate like he did against Xiao. Even if he met his personal enemy, or a crazy child trafficker, or an evil lord who didn't shirk from any crime, the third Master Jun would think that giving them a quick death with his sword would be enough. But he didn't believe that it would be enough for Xiao. Not even nearly enough. Jun Xie wouldn't even wish to kill him if it were possible. He would have wanted to leave his enemy to be tortured slowly for a lifetime. The third Master Jun wanted to expose Xiao to the pain from the very 18th level of hell every day. And he believed that even that would be too less for Xiao. A long sword fell from a high altitude in the sky. It carried a cold and dazzling light with it. The sword seemingly cut the very sky as it shot down. It then struck into a large rock on the roadside with a loud screech, and embedded itself into it. Only the sword hilt and the handle remained outside the rock. It was Jun Xie's sword. It was an extremely sharp and divine weapon. It was so sharp and powerful that it had pierced a solid rock up till its hilt like it was tofu. What kind of a divine weapon is this? Almost every warrior who looked at that sword had sparks blazing in his eyes. In fact, even the solitary falcon was no exception to this, even though he had never used a sword. It had to be said that the fact that Jun Xie's legs had been healed had shocked everyone from the Silver City. And they still hadn't recovered from it even when Xiao had got caught in that storm-like barrage of attacks. How did you dare? However, everyone finally recovered from their reverie owing to this new and astonishing sight. Xiao Buyu shouted angrily and moved out. And his hand moved like a sky-rendering hatchet which would behead Jun Xie. Xiao Buyu would have been pained and enraged if Jun Xie's sword had killed Xiao. But it would have been difficult for Xiao Buyu to break his position. After all, these 2 men were in the middle of a duel to the death. However, Jun Xie had gained an absolute advantage. But he wasn't killing Xiao. Instead, he was meticulously beating and torturing his enemy. And this amounted to the fall of the Silver Blizzard City's honor. And the Xiao family's honor. How could Xiao Buyu sit and watch this happen? Old man, you're very shameless. An exceptionally lofty figure appeared as the angry shout resounded. He somehow appeared right in front of Xiao Buyu. And a glittering sword flashed towards his throat without any warning. The sword hadn't touched his throat yet. However, Xiao Buyu had already started to feel terrible goosebumps on his throat because of the sword's qi. A sharp and heaven-piercing aura enveloped him. Divine weapon. It's a divine weapon. Xiao Buyu was shocked by this. How can the Jun family have so many divine weapons? A spirit Xian's body was stronger than steel. So, they needn't fear attacks from normal weapons. But, this heaven-conquering divine sword left Xiao Buyu to feel that his life was as fragile as tofu. In fact, such a feeling could be compared to the instinctual premonition of death. Xiao Buyu didn't slip up at this critical juncture. His body moved quickly, and he changed direction at a lightning-fast speed. A long string of afterimages snaked his trail as he soared into the air. Then, he stayed there since he was aware that he was out of the attacker's range now. Moreover, the Xiao elder could finally look at his assailant from this position now. However, Xiao Buyu nearly fell from the sky when he finally saw the attacker. So, he rubbed his eyes hard and looked again. However, the Xiao elder couldn't help but resemble the predicament of his grandson's astonishment. His mouth opened wide, and didn't shut back either. How is this possible? It was a young and aloof figure. He held a coldly gleaming sword, and his face had a sneering expression as he floated in front. Jun Moxie. The sword in his hand. A divine weapon. The blood of yellow flame. Young Master Jun seemed quite pleased with himself. The first life his blood of fellow flame would take was going to be a spirit Xian expert. This was indeed worthy of his sword's name and fame. Do you have any honor, old man? This is a fight between two men. And you're still getting involved? What kind of a spirit Xian expert are you? Jun Moxie gave a sneering smile. Your grandson was the one who made that challenge. May I ask the second Xiao elder what the people from the Silver Blizzard City think about the prospect of taking a man's name for a fight to the death? Are you still going to enter the fight? Will your entire group fight against one man now? Xiao Buyu's white beard fluttered in the wind as he snorted coldly and spoke up. This brat talks too much. A severely cold wind arose from his hands as he rushed towards Jun Moxie. Xiao Buyu's state of mind had become calm after the initial shock. Jun Moxie must be a heaven-conquering talent, but he's still 17 or 18 years old at the most. So, how can he be difficult to deal with? So what if he has a divine weapon? I will beat this arrogant brat down. Then, I will take that divine weapon for myself. That divine weapon had suddenly taken priority over Xiao Han's life. Jun Moxie sneered as his body flitted. He pointed his sword one way, and attacked in the other. His sword emitted a showery light as he confronted the Silver City's level 4 spirit Xian Xiao Buyu with an unexpected attack. And the entire sky got filled with a brilliant rain of light as a result. Xiao Buyu was already at level 4 of the spirit Xian realm. So, he was almost at the level of a great master. But he was still nothing in the young Master Jun's eyes. Jun Moxie had the blood of yellow flame in his hand. And that had made his strength explode to 2 or 3 levels higher. Moreover, the young Master Jun's strength couldn't be compared to the regular Sky Xian experts. Therefore, Jun Moxie's overall strength was in no way less than Xiao Buyu's. In fact, he could even take the lead. The curtain of night had finally descended to rule the land by now. There was fighting all around. In fact, it was a situation of open conflict. The solitary falcon had soared like an eagle at lightning-fast speed, and had arrived to stop the 7 swords. The 7 swords hadn't dared to break formation in front of the might of the great master. All of them were at the Sky Xian peak level. So, they couldn't compare to the solitary falcon. They could barely deal with him if they were to fight together. However, they wouldn't have the skill to deal with the solitary falcon in case even one of them slipped up. And all of them would die as a result of that slip. The fighting had come to a stalemate for the time being. The other 5 elders had wanted to help. But they had suddenly felt suffocated for some reason. And they were left with a desire to lock themselves in as a result. They had been enshrouded in a biting cold killing intention. Moreover, this killing intention was so grandiose that it seemed as if the entire sky had been filled with an extremely powerful murderous aura. However, it was strange that they couldn't tell where that murderous aura was coming from. So, how could they lock themselves in? The green-clothed girl was passively watching from the side besides them. So, it obviously wasn't her. And the white-clothed girl had her back towards the 5 elders. Plus, she was calmly drinking her tea like before. So, it couldn't have been her either. Who is this? Who can have such a terrifying strength? However, it was evident that this person's strength had already exceeded that of a great master's. In fact, it had even reached the highest of levels. Each of the 5 elders was at the spirit Xian realm. But all of them stood dumbstruck in the face of such a monstrous aura. So, each one of them transported and scattered their strength throughout their bodies, and did their best to withstand the onslaught of that murderous aura. Therefore, they couldn't help Xiao Han or the 7 swords at this moment. In fact, they couldn't even move their fingers. They simply couldn't dare to move an inch. And this was because they felt that they shouldn't do a thing. They believed that all of them would get killed if any one of them moved. We can't rush in at this time. Only one person will die at this time if things come to the worst. And that will be Xiao Han. But all of us will be wiped out if we try to help. This wasn't a threat. It was a fact instead. And that extremely powerful aura had verified the authenticity of this fact to them. The green-clad girl opened her eyes wide in surprise. She was the only one who knew where that murderous aura was coming from. There were countless capable experts in that world. But the Snake King had met only one individual who could exert such an aura and control it so freely. And that individual was her elder sister. What's going on? Elder sister obviously hates Jun Moxie. So, why is she helping him? This was truly difficult to understand. And it seemed that the highly intelligent Snake King would also break her skull before she'd come to understand why this was happening. Jun Moxie was fighting Xiao Buyu. The young Master Jun's moves were marvelous. He was flying in the sky at a very quick speed. He would go to the front, to the back, the left, and the right. However, Xiao Buyu stood gloomily and calmly. His breathing was steady, and his expression was hostile. This had gone far beyond the expectations of everyone present. The rumored greatest debauchee of Tianxiang wasn't just taking on the maybe 60 years or older and well-renowned spirit Xian Xiao Buyu, he was also proving to be a match for him. Moreover, the youngster was also taking the initiative for over 70% of the offensives. Xiao Buyu's face was calm and collected. However, he was shocked on the inside. He had never been in such a fight in his entire life. In fact, the old man hadn't even felt like this when he used to spar with the old lord of the Silver City. He felt like his limbs had been tied. Moreover, it seemed that danger lurked everywhere. Why does it feel that I have no control over life or death? How can this young brat make me feel such a strong sense of danger? This brat's moves are extremely weird. I can't even predict his next move. And he's not giving me any good opportunity to attack either. He keeps appearing at different places for a very short time. And his unpredictable moves are cornering me into a difficult position. Moreover, his intermittent sword moves are very hard to counterattack against. That youngster's sword moves were extremely amazing. In fact, they had far exceeded the range of Xiao Buyu's imagination. Every slash was unrivaled in fierceness, and every move was full of murderous aura. However, none of the moves could be tracked. They were like an antelope's horns, untraceable. Moreover, every attack was directed at his opponent's weak spots. There is an amazing repository inside the Silver Blizzard City. And every move that the members ever knew about have been written down there. They even have the corresponding methods of countering those moves. But this brat is continuously changing his styles. In fact, his swordplay has changed more than a dozen times. However, I can't even recognize these styles. So, it's useless to even mention the prospect of countering them. This is simply unimaginable. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 422. Exactly what was desired from the game. The degree of sharpness of the sword in that youngster's hand had left everyone to gasp in amazement. Xiao Buyu had never seen such a divine weapon in his life. It can split anyone open by barely rubbing against them. It doesn't matter if it is rock, steel, or even Xian power. In fact, this sword could even cut through the Xian Qi defense of a level 4 spirit Xian. Therefore, Xiao Buyu had no choice but to take a firm defensive stance. He was only focused on defending at this time. However, Xiao Buyu had still started to feel ineffably powerless. None of the things which have happened today are any less than unimaginable or fantastical. I would have found it very amusing and satisfying if I had seen these things happening to someone else. In fact, I would be having an excited guffaw, and my face would have been filled with waves of excitement. But it's a complete and thorough tragedy that something like this is happening to me. It could be said that Xiao Buyu couldn't even cry when he wanted to. This fight felt like the one between a man and a ghost. The man may have had such an overwhelming strength that it could have shaken mountains and destroyed cliffs, but the opponent didn't have a physical presence. Therefore, strength wouldn't work against them. In fact, it would be of no use. Moreover, it would only be a big waste of effort on the man's part. I know that a ghost is only a ghost, and has no strength. But that ghost still has the ability to kill me. Xiao Buyu was genuinely sad. In fact, he was very regretful. It would have been so great if we had returned when the order from the Silver City had arrived. How could we have landed ourselves in such big trouble then? It's a pity. Such a pity. But it's too late for this old man to repent now. Xiao Buyu insisted on persevering against changing tactics with the same technique. And he was waiting for the time when Jun Xie would exhaust his power. After all, it was an obvious fact that he wouldn't be able to attack Xiao Buyu once he had exhausted his strength, even if he was a heaven-conquering talent and with an extremely clever set of skills. After all, Jun Xie was still young at the end of the day. So, how profound could his strength be? Xiao Buyu had concluded that Jun Xie had already reached the first levels of Sky Xian realm after the last face-off. And such cultivation at that young an age was shocking. This level of Xian's strength is comparatively higher than ordinary. However, my level 4 spirit Xian strength is only a single step behind that of a great master. And I may have to suffer a higher degree of mental exhaustion while continuously defending against these attacks, But my physical exhaustion is still far lesser than it would have been if I were attacking. This blizzard of maddened attacks from the young Master Jun must be exhausting his Xian strength very fast. I have to drag this fight on for a long time. So, I can't waste any energy. And I'm sure that I will get the final opportunity to win if I keep steady and strike hard without slipping a once. I will tire him to his death as long as I can delay. Xiao Buyu's plan seemed foolproof in the prevailing scenario. In fact, it was brilliant. After all, such tactics were applicable anywhere. And one could say that no one else in the world could go beyond that. It's true that it wasn't generally possible to beat such a tactic. However, this didn't mean that it was absolutely impossible either. For example, using these delaying tactics against Jun Moxie was a huge and special mistake. And that was because the young Master Jun was a monster with as many heads as a hydra. Moreover, he didn't care about wasting energy. However, the young Master Jun's heart also had some misgivings even if he had an all-round advantage at that moment. After all, Xiao Buyu was a level 4 spirit Xian expert. He was surely a step behind the solitary falcon in strength. But the difference in their Xian cultivation wasn't that enormous. In fact, the difference in the strengths of these two opponents was so huge that the young Master Jun believed that his superior skill set could only bring this fight to a lose-lose situation in case he tried to use his entire strength in an all-out attack. The young Master Jun would suffer heavy losses if he tried that. And he would be able to inflict similar injuries to the other side as well. However, the injuries still wouldn't prove fatal. But how could the young Master Jun be willing to take such a desperate decision against this old fox? Jun Moxie was as young as the rising sun, and he hadn't lived enough of his extravagant life yet. So, wouldn't dying with this nearly 100-year-old man be too much? It was a pity that Xiao Buyu cherished his life similarly. In fact, he cherished it far more than what Jun Moxie could have imagined he would. Moreover, he still wanted to preserve his honor as a spirit Xian expert. He was still putting on airs while dealing with a powerful enemy like Jun Moxie. In fact, he had even fallen into a disadvantageous position by taking the back foot, but he still hadn't used his sword until now. After all, it would be completely unjustifiable if a renowned top-tier fighter and level 4 spirit Xian expert was to use his sword against a 16-17-year-old boy. However, Xiao Buyu couldn't have imagined that his fail-safe plan of making the enemy exhaust their energy was working the other way round, since he was only exhausting his own self by doing that. Jun Moxie's attacks and tactics became increasingly magnificent as the fight progressed. But he also felt admiration in his heart. My attacks are vigorous and sharp. Moreover, none of these moves have ever been seen in this world before. In fact, I'm sure that each move of mine can cause a huge shock to anyone who witnesses it. But this second elder of the Xiao family is genuinely worthy of his fame. He is worthy of being labeled as someone who is only one step behind a great master. My attacks are frantic, and they are very difficult to deal with. I've even managed to confuse him at times. But he has still managed to use his profound Xian skills and deep battle experience to hold out for so long. Xiao Buyu's Xian strength can't be compared to that of that wretched Bailey Xiongfeng. In fact, they aren't even on the same page. Both of them might be called spirit Xian experts. But Bailey Xiongfeng was merely a regular spirit Xian expert, while Xiao Buyu is at level 4 of the spirit Xian realm. That is a huge difference. Moreover, I've had countless opportunities to stab Xiao Buyu with my sword. But I would have had to face Xiao Buyu's crazy counterattack if I had attempted that. And his counterattack would have been fatal. I could deal a fatal blow to any normal person if I were to use my art of unlocking the heavens' fortune. Moreover, there would be no risk to my life in such a case. But I can't bring this old guy down with my strength. In fact, the gains wouldn't be worth the losses if I were to calculate it properly. Therefore, the young Master Jun merely continued to move about. He had the Sky Xian cultivation to protect his body, and the Hong Jun Pagoda to support his energy. Jun Moxie's spiritual energy was like an endless stream. And it could be said that he could use it endlessly since it would never run out. Therefore, Xiao Buyu was getting increasingly defensive as the fight dragged on. And he was invariably forced into taking stricter defensive actions. However, the young Master Jun was slowly getting more room to do what he wanted. So, his moves were also becoming bolder and more violent. His sword moved like fireworks in the night sky. It appeared as if his sword was like the moon that was providing the heavens' illumination to a temple on a cold night. Xiao Buyu was getting increasingly cautious for the fear of exposing any weakness. And Jun Moxie had become livelier as a result. He had started to move more freely. In fact, he even managed to pull off some good poses and stances. Therefore, the young Master Jun obviously looked very valiant and heroic. Jun Xie had already finished his fight on the other side. Then, he had recovered his sword, and had held it up in his hands. Meanwhile, Xiao Han was lying curled on the ground like a ball of mud. It was hard to tell whether he was alive or dead. And the solitary falcon had beaten the 7 swords in an even more brilliant fashion. However, the Snake King and the white-clothed girl had been focusing on the fight between Jun Moxie and Xiao Buyu from the very beginning. They hadn't done so because of the ferocity of the fight. Instead, it was because of Jun Moxie's swordplay. It was genuinely amazing. Every move and every pattern had left the 2 women dazzled. Some of those moves may have seemed average and simple. However, a careful study would leave anyone to realize that they were very profound in reality. Each strike could be used to attack or defend if needed. Moreover, the swordplay and footwork matched perfectly, and had left them to gasp in amazement. They wouldn't have believed that such wonderful moves genuinely existed in the world if they hadn't seen it for themselves. The 2 of them could see the real strength of Jun Moxie's swordplay due to their exceedingly outstanding strength. Jun Moxie was merely a base-level Sky Xian, but he had still used those moves and had fought a level 4 Spirit Xian expert to a standstill. In fact, he had dominated the offensive for the most parts of the fight. There were other factors at play as well, but this was still the fact that had dictated the fight for the most part. How strong would the Snake King or the white-clothed girl become if someone of their strength were used those moves? Haha, the Snake King laughed and stood up. She reacted in this manner because Jun Moxie had made an unusual move after his last swordplay. He had cocked his legs, and he had made a strange gesture of salute towards Xiao Buyu with his buttocks. And this action had seemed very offensive to say the least. In fact, it was wrong on many levels. Therefore, the Snake King couldn't help but laugh as she spoke. It's one thing to fight the fight. But it's entirely another thing to make that sort of a gesture. He's a mere base-rank Sky Xian contending against a level 4 Spirit Xian. Is he trying to court his death? You're mistaken. The white-clad girl looked dully at the fighting men, and slowly continued. Xiao Buyu is a proper level 4 Spirit Xian expert. He has accumulated a lifetime of profound Xian Qi. That Jun brat has a wonderful method that quickly replenishes his Xian Qi. But he's merely at the Sky Xian realm at the end of the day. Thus, his combat output and power is somewhat limited. So, It would be hard to determine the victor of this battle even if this fight drags on for another night and day, since he's finding it hard to force Xiao Buyu into wasting his energy. So, Jun Xie can only be successful if he manages to provoke and anger Xiao Buyu first. Then, he can take advantage of the situation with his crazy attacks. Jun Xie is in a dominant position if you analyze the current situation. But the diversity of his dense and ferocious attacks will eventually be exhausted at some point. Xiao Buyu may perhaps suffer 1 or 2 hits if he shows a weakness, but he will be able to withstand them. However, Xiao Buyu can deal an extremely fatal blow using his level 4 Spirit Xian strength if he is able to grasp a proper opportunity. But Jun Xie's crazy antiques won't be able to make Xiao Buyu angry. Right? After all, Xiao Buyu is a member of the society at large. He has amassed decades worth of cultivation, and has experience of many years. So, he won't get mad so easily, right? The Snake King was somewhat unconvinced. Xiao Buyu is obviously an experienced man, and won't fall for such tricks by the enemy. But you haven't noticed that Xiao Buyu is thrown into confusion every time Jun Xie makes an exquisite move. And he has now made a very insulting pose as well. And Xiao Buyu would be thrown into confusion for a moment this time as well. You could say that this action of Jun Xie's was very effective from a certain angle. In fact, the Xiao elder's confused state of mind would make it very difficult for him to seize the opportunity to attack even if Jun Xie had exposed some weakness by chance. Moreover, Xiao Buyu is very unlikely to catch on to this trick play. Therefore, Xiao Buyu will only be left to regard this as a new tactic of Jun Xie's. Hence, Xiao Buyu wouldn't be able to launch a counterattack when Jun Xie does something like this again. And this will only create more opportunities for Jun Xie, since Xiao Buyu will continue to remain in a confused state of mind. So, you could say that this is Jun Xie's trick to maintain this current state of affairs. I have to admit that this idea is indeed very innovative in its own merit. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 423. To threaten the east and strike the west instead. The white-clothed girl smiled faintly and said, "So, I can conclude that Jun Xie hinted at Xiao Buyu that I can tussle with you for a long time. And he's doing this more often now. But Xiao Buyu is old and experienced. He wishes to go steady and strike hard when the time is right. So, he wouldn't make a risky counterattack. And Xiao Buyu will continue with his strategy of making Jun Xie die of exhaustion. However, it doesn't seem like Jun Xie will get exhausted anytime soon. But Xiao Buyu will continue to hope for it to happen. Therefore, he will neither attack nor retreat. Thus, I think this fight will go on for a long time." "But, elder sister, didn't you say that Jun Xie is trying to make Xiao Buyu angry?" The Snake King became even more puzzled. "Isn't what you said contradictory to that?" He gave that sort of a hint to Xiao Buyu even though the old man is very cautious. So, how will this make Xiao Buyu angry? And how will he expose any weaknesses if his mind is stable? Xiao Buyu is extremely even-tempered. Moreover, he has ample time on his side. However, Jun Xie has still made these actions at this time. He should have waited for a better opportunity if he genuinely wanted to incite Xiao Buyu's rage. The white-clad girl chuckled and said, "Don't you think you've missed something? Hasn't Jun Xie secretly glanced at the fight between the solitary falcon and the 7 swords at least 3 times by now?" Are you saying that he wants to sneak up on the seven swords? Does he plan to enrage Xiao Buyu by doing that? The Snake King's eyes shone as she continued. That's a brilliant plan if that's the case. Xiao Buyu would surely lose his cool if Jun Moxie gets rid of even one of the seven swords. However, even I don't understand one thing. Jun Moxie's movements are secretive. But Xiao Buyu is also a renowned expert of his generation. In fact, he's a level 4 spirit Xian expert. So, he would surely be extremely observant while fighting. How could Jun Moxie have concealed his movements from Xiao Buyu despite all efforts? And how would Xiao Buyu allow Jun Moxie to prevail if he had already noticed it? The seven swords will collapse if everything goes smoothly, since the solitary falcon would slaughter them very quickly. And the Silver City would be utterly defeated thereafter. So, Xiao Buyu must be on guard. Therefore, it seems that Jun Moxie's calculations may have gone wrong. The white-clothed girl seemed to have understood everything clearly at first. However, she had started to harbor doubts as time passed. Those words even filled the Snake King's heart with doubts. However, the situation suddenly changed again at this moment. Jun Moxie reused a move that he had already used twice before. That move was still superb. Moreover, the young Master Jun had suddenly sped up this time. Around 10 savage after images of Jun Moxie circled around the Xiao elder. And it seemed that 10 young Master Juns had drawn their swords and attacked. However, the biting cold sword lights seemingly condensed into one ray of light. Xiao Buyu sneered at this. Amateur. Have you finally exhausted all the tricks in your bag? This is the third time you've used that same trick. Haha. You used the same trick 3 times against a level 4 spirit Xian. Your attack was certainly faster and better this time. But that doesn't change the fact that you're using it a third time now. Your time of judgment has finally arrived. Now this old man will teach you a lesson for overestimating your capabilities and challenging me. Xiao Buyu laughed and slanted his palms to attack. His palms transformed into mountains in an instant. He then shifted his palms towards his left to face the powerful sword attack from one of Jun Moxie's after images. This was the point where Jun Moxie had made a mistake. There was no mistaking now. Xiao Buyu's judgment indeed wasn't wrong. Jun Moxie would inevitably have a problem if he had used up the entire range of his moves. Therefore, the reusage of that sword attack would result in a tragedy for him at this time. However, it was a pity that Jun Moxie hadn't reused those moves in reality. One must never consider anything to be a constant when making calculations. Jun Moxie's sword had already completed half of its movement when Xiao Buyu decided to take advantage of this situation. After all, there was a basic principle in martial arts. One can't decide whether he genuinely wishes to cross a river when he's in midstream. As it turns out, no one could have changed their attack style in the middle of it. Even a spirit Xian expert, or maybe even a great master, wouldn't have been able to accomplish such a feat. However, Jun Moxie used the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune, and the impossible turned into possible. A drastic change occurred when Jun Moxie's sword was halfway and Xiao Buyu's attack was about to connect with it. The young Master Jun stopped moving in that direction, and changed direction. Then, it attempted a move that was ambitious enough to alarm the heavens. A single burst of silvery bright explosion burst out from the sword as it roared when it was merely a hair's breadth from Xiao Buyu. Then, it passed by his side, continued its flight, and transformed into a long silver line. The sword light appeared like a long tube as it flashed horizontally across that nearly 50 meters of space, and rushed straight towards the 7 swords. The body and the sword had become one. Jun Moxie had used his biggest and most formidable move at the most unlikely of moments. This sword attack was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Moreover, the seven swords were also in a very tense situation at this moment. Those seven individuals were in imminent danger, and were holding back against the great master solitary falcon with great difficulty. So, this move by Jun Moxie had only made it worse since they had an enemy to the front and one to the back now. The situation was already bad before. And it couldn't get any worse now. There is a camel whose backbone can be broken by putting a single straw on it. But someone suddenly puts 100 kilos on it. Wouldn't it get shattered to pieces? Xiao Buyu gave out a cold scream when he realized that he had been duped. He didn't even consider how the Jun family's little fox had managed to change direction in the middle of an attack, even though this strange incident had gone against the very principle of martial theory. After all, his present top priority was to do his best to save the seven swords. He angrily soared like a rocket with full speed. Moreover, he urgently raised his Xian Qi and transferred the Xian efficacy from the rest of his body to his palms, and shot them like angry rockets. Then, that attack rushed forward almost 2 to 3 times his own speed. Xiao Buyu was extremely angry at that moment. That brat had played a big one with that move. Therefore, Xiao Buyu had done his best with this move. He had used his full strength in that attack. The efficacy of his entire body was in that strike. The seven swords would suffer some damage if Jun Moxie's strike was successful. But then, Jun Moxie would die soon after. Xiao Buyu was assured of this point. Therefore, he was angry, but not very worried. And that was because the seven swords belonged to the family of the Silver City's lord. They were a part of the Silver Blizzard City. But they didn't hail from the Xiao family. Therefore, Xiao Buyu wouldn't feel too sad even if Jun Moxie's attack was successful and he managed to kill 1 or 2 of them as a result. In fact, Xiao Buyu would be fine as long as he would be able to kill that brat. Therefore, Xiao Buyu wasn't extremely enraged even though he was a bit angry. The sword light didn't seem like it would stop. In fact, it had already arrived behind the seven swords like lightning. And Xiao Buyu hurried to catch up. In fact, he was less than 20 meters behind Jun Moxie at this time. And this distance wasn't a big one for a spirit Xian expert. Xiao Buyu's sleeves were whipping violently in the wind, and were issuing a sharp whistle. The old man had turned into a blurry image. And it was evident that his speed had increased very significantly. The young Master Jun had orchestrated a grand plan in his mind. But it didn't seem like he had any major advantage left at this time. The solitary falcon frowned. In fact, he felt resentful when he saw Jun Moxie arrive with his sword. I've established a proper dominance here. And yet you're meddling. You may think that you've come to help me, but you're causing a nuisance in reality. I would have won very easily as long as you would have continued to fight Xiao Buyu. But you simply had to butt in. In fact, you could get caught up and die because of this even if I speed up my victory. Did this seem like a good plan to you? However, the cultivation of the seven swords was much lower. So, they were already feeling immense pressure while fighting the solitary falcon. And now, they had to contend with the violent and crazed attacks from Jun Moxie as well. They had enemies to the front and to the back now. In fact, these people felt like there was a thorn on their backside which had started to pierce their skin. Xiao Buyu had a nasty grin on his face. The Xian power stored in his long-awaited palm attack struck with a loud bang. Yet, everyone cried out in surprise. It was because Jun Moxie's silhouette had suddenly disappeared. In fact, he had disappeared very abruptly. The boy had disappeared like a flying angel. It seemed as if he had never existed. That tube-like sword light had also disappeared without a trace. It had vanished silently, and there was no sign of it. In fact, it seemed like that strong sword light from before had been an illusion or something. However, Xiao Buyu had already reached the peak of his speed. And he couldn't change his moves at will like Jun Moxie had. Moreover, the target of those two mountain-toppling powerful shots had disappeared. So, he quickly raised his attack and changed its angle downwards. Consequently, it whooshed over the 7 swords and resolutely hit the solitary falcon instead. The pressure behind the Silver City's 7 swords suddenly disappeared. And they instead saw Xiao Buyu arrive to help them. This made them extremely joyous. So, they attacked the solitary falcon with their entire strength. However, everything had suddenly changed for the solitary falcon since he was fighting a powerful group of enemies now. The pressure from the opposite side had increased suddenly, and had reached 3 or 4 times of its previous level. He couldn't help but snort at this change of events. It seems like that brat hadn't come here to help me. He has instead become the source of my calamity. Did he look at me and think that my fight with these 7 has been easy? However, even a man as strong as the solitary falcon couldn't help but feel desperate in the face of the all-out attacks of these 8 men. Everyone heard him shout, "Ghostly falcon," before he sallied forth to attack with all his strength. Then, the sky got covered with the image of a terrifying claw. In fact, it seemed like countless images of ghostly claws had rushed to counterattack the 8 people of the Silver City from the malicious gates of hell itself. The sword chi of the 7 swords screeched in midair. Xiao Buyu's palm attacks made a rumbling noise. And solitary falcon's ghostly falcon claw could rip apart the night sky with its intensely powerful chi. The 9 individuals charged into a clash which hurt all of them as they rammed. However, a loud and arrogant laughter echoed when the 9 men rammed together. That laughing voice had belonged to the young master Jun Moxie. The young man had suddenly reappeared in front of Xiao Han. Such an astonishing speed was divine in its make, and couldn't be measured. Perhaps it should be said that 2 different Jun Moxies had appeared at 2 very different places at the same time. In fact, this seemed like the only possible explanation since no one would have been able to wrap their heads around the fact that both these Jun Moxies was the same person. In fact, they wouldn't have been able to figure it out even if they were to break their skulls while attempting to comprehend this fact. Xiao Buyu was shocked the moment he heard the young Master Jun's clear and arrogant laugh. He turned around to look, only to see that Jun Moxie had a cruel sneer across his face. His cold sword light was quickly rushing towards the immobile Xiao Han. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 424. Cruel. This despicable brat actually dares to do this? Xiao Buyu roared with a desire to crack him open. After all, that man was his grandson. He could feel his courage failing since things were out of his control now. In fact, he felt as if his heart was being twisted. The old man was so mad that he started to burn with a maddening rage. Xiao Buyu's hair had stood up, it seemed as if he had been struck by lightning. Yet, he could only get enraged and show it. But he couldn't do anything else. In fact, he didn't even dare to do anything else. And that was because the solitary falcon's tyrannical attack had collided with the Xiao elder's palms like a storm a moment ago. A great master had struck back with all his strength. How could it be an ordinary attack? Xiao Buyu's strength was only a step away from that of a great master's. And he even had 7 skilled people at his side. However, the situation on the battlefield still didn't seem optimistic. It appeared as if an atomic bomb had exploded from the center of their battle. The 8 people were thrown backwards into 8 different directions because of the explosion. The solitary falcon stood heroically at the center. He was motionless, and his hair was fluttering in the wild wind. In fact, they seemed to resemble the seaweed that whip about in the seabed water currents during a storm. One of the greatest Xian experts of his generation hadn't retracted a single step in the face of powerful attacks from his 8 opponents. The corners of Xiao Buyu's mouth streamed with blood as he flew backwards. But he didn't have time to check his own injuries, or even put a check on his momentum as he flew backwards. Instead, he gave a long and miserable scream as he pounced towards Xiao Han's direction. His face was twisted, aggrieved, and had a brutal expression on it. Jun Xie had gained an overwhelming advantage over Xiao Han in their fight, and had given his opponent a thorough beating thereafter. He had broken Xiao Han's arms and legs, and had also struck his nether regions. Xiao Han's meridians had also been shattered into many pieces. Therefore, he had become an out-and-out cripple. However, Jun Xie hadn't killed his enemy, he had only crippled him. Killing Xiao Han wouldn't be bad enough as a punishment. So, Third Master Jun wanted his enemy to suffer his pain before he killed the man. He wanted to vent out his anger in this manner, even if it was dragged out. The degree of Xiao Han's deformity was greater than what Jun Xie had suffered earlier. And Xiao Buyu had understood Jun Xie's intentions very clearly. Therefore, he wasn't being irascible. Xiao Han wouldn't be able to do Xian training after this. But Xiao Buyu knew that his grandson had the aid of the Xiao family's replenishing jade. Therefore, he was convinced that there was hope for the injured Xiao Han's recovery. However, Jun Xie didn't know this fact. Xiao Buyu had also planned to resolve the conflict between the Jun and the Xiao family by using this matter as a pretext. After all, Xiao Han had been the root of everything that had happened. It wasn't that Xiao Buyu wanted to take it lying down, or intended to renounce Xiao Han. Rather, it was because of that awfully tyrannical and unrivaled mysterious person who was backing the Jun family. Things will become easier between the 2 families if this matter is resolved. In fact, Xiao Buyu was very relieved. Xiao Han had surely been crippled. Moreover, he had also been insulted by Jun Xie very badly. However, he didn't feel the need to worry about his grandson's life. And this was because Xiao Buyu clearly understood the Third Master Jun's personality. Jun Xie and Xiao Han had deep hatred towards each other. But Jun Xie had always been someone with a noble character. And no one could deny that fact. A man of noble character may wish to torture an enemy a little. He may even decide to kill his enemy, but such a person would never go the extreme lengths of torture. Therefore, Xiao Buyu had felt increasingly relieved after he had seen Jun Xie inflicting only pain to Xiao Han. After all, Jun Xie didn't intend to kill him. Xiao Han wouldn't be permanently crippled either. In other words, Xiao Han would suffer serious injuries, but he wouldn't die at the end of the day. However, Xiao Han had fallen into Jun Moxie's hand now. So, things had changed. In fact, they had changed very drastically. Who was Jun Moxie? He was the most cruel and unscrupulous man ever born. The manner in which he dealt with people was very different from that of Jun Xie's style. In fact, they couldn't be compared since the younger Jun was too spiteful and cruel. In fact, His methods could send shivers down anyone's spines. Jun Moxie had tossed everything in this move. He had tricked Xiao Buyu and had turned towards Xiao Han. In fact, he had intended to use this method to enrage Xiao Buyu this entire time. And he would later use this instance to kill him once the opportunity would arise. The blood of yellow flame was the best sword in the entire world. And Jun Moxie wanted a spirit Xian expert to be its first tribute in terms of blood. However, Jun Moxie's mindset went through a turbulent change the moment he arrived in front of Xiao Han. And his heart was swept over with sorrow and grief. His thoughts were suddenly run over with a thirst to commit cruelty. In fact, this desire had even overshadowed his very soul. The image of a lofty and formidable white-clothed middle-aged man appeared in front of him. His gaze was mild, yet sharp. He stood tall and proud like a mountain. The man waved his hand, and a huge army of bloodied men attacked triumphantly in the battle. Nothing could defeat his army's attack. And the men deferentially addressed the white-clothed man as the White Commander. However, the cruel-hearted Xiao Han had gotten such an open-hearted man, a man who was like the patron saint of Tianxiang, killed. Jun Moxie's eyes became red. His mind suddenly found itself filled with resentment, violent rage, and an endless desire to kill. In fact, that anger and hate filled his very heart and guts. Then, another mighty and bright figure appeared in front of his eyes. It was his second uncle Jun Meng. The scene in his mind changed again, and a gentle and virtuous woman appeared. She was giving him an exceptionally loving look. Her gaze was extremely doting, loving, and affectionate. In fact, this love was as vast as the oceans. After all, it was the love of a mother. Mother. Then, two handsome youngsters showed up. They looked almost the same as him. And they were looking at him with hope and expectation. Take revenge. Take revenge. These cries suddenly filled Jun Moxie's mind like a tsunami. And those words started to echo inside his head. Only those two words. Nothing but those two words. Jun Moxie didn't know how those images, those scenes, and those voices had appeared to him so suddenly. However, these exceptionally abrupt and mysterious recollections had sourced from his own memory. After all, his memory had been fused with those of this body's previous owner. Therefore, he had retained these beautiful images as well. But these recollections had given rise to bitter hatred in the backdrop of the events of the past. That unrivaled hero and that peerless beauty were wronged and killed because of the conspiracies of this lowly and despicable Xiao Han. Jun Moxie suddenly felt that his veins would explode. He felt indescribable grief and indignation. That feeling then bubbled forth towards his heart. Then, it proceeded towards his mind. And he broke away from his original intention when that happened. Take revenge. How can those heroes die in vain? How could those heroes be wronged? Jun Moxie roared, and his eyes reddened as he raised his sword. Xiao Buyu turned to look, and saw Jun Moxie pierce Xiao Han's eyes. And then, he heard the chillingly fierce words, Xiao Buyu, I wish for your grandson to never see again. This sword of mine shall take revenge for the thousands of soldiers who were killed by you. The unconscious Xiao Han was met with a painful awakening when his eyes were taken away. And he gave a bitter, desperate, and blood-curdling screech. Then, there was a loud explosion as he gnashed his teeth into pieces. His blood-covered face looked extremely miserable as he screamed with incomparable hatred. I will take revenge for this hatred. Jun Wu Yi. I will make slaves out of all men and women of the Jun family. Arg. Murderous intentions flourished in Jun Moxie's eyes, and the murderous aura inside his body became even more concentrated. Xiao Buyu roared, and flew forth with increased urgency. My grandson. Jun Moxie. Stop. Or I will cut your body into 1,000,000 pieces. But Jun Moxie was already next to Xiao Han. So it was too easy for him. He slashed his sword on each of Xiao Han's arms. And these slashes were answered by a scream of pain and the splutter of blood. Xiao Buyu's body trembled violently, and he vomited blood as he helplessly looked on. Xiao Han. I have taken away your arms now. Xiao Han. You want to take revenge? I will chase you to the ends of this world. I will wipe out my family's disgrace with this sword. Jun Moxie gnashed his teeth and gave a sinister and fierce laugh before he said, Xiao Buyu. Aren't you a spirit Xian expert? Aren't you the greatest of the senior generation? Come quickly and save your grandson. Come on. Can't you dare to? I will even take away your legs. This strike is for my uncle. This is for the 10 years of confined suffering that he had to go through. The sword flashed twice, and tendons of Xiao Han's legs were cut off. Jun Moxie's eyes were abnormally clear as the corners of his mouth curled into a ferocious smile. His narrowed eyes then quickly turned to the anxiously speeding Xiao Buyu as he sneered and roared. And this strike is for my father. You won't be able to hear from now on. Xiao Han. Don't, everyone from the Silver City cried out in unison. However, Jun Moxie's sword flashed again, and Xiao Han's ears flew away from his head. Then, the sword flashed again, and Xiao Han's nose also flew out. Then, his teeth came flying out of his mouth. And they were followed by his tongue a moment later. You can't speak now. This was for the debt to my second uncle. Jun Moxie proclaimed with somewhat a savage delight, and laughed wildly. Xiao Buyu's blood boiled. The injuries he had suffered from his collusion with the solitary falcon weren't serious. But they were still internal injuries at the end of the day. He was a spirit Xian expert, but even he couldn't help his blood steam at the sight of his grandson's misery. Therefore, he couldn't prevent his Xian qi from acting up and scattering inside his meridians. He was still some distance from Jun Moxie when he staggered and fell over. Then, Xiao Buyu stood up with difficulty and raised his head before spraying a mouthful of blood. He could only see a golden light of confusion flashing in front of his eyes. The old man helplessly looked at Jun Moxie. He then gnashed his teeth in hatred before he spoke up in a low voice. Why are you so cruel? Jun Moxie? Don't you fear karma? Don't you fear retribution? Jun Moxie gave him a cruel look and laughed. You are mentioning karma and retribution. Xiao Buyu. Did your Xiao family not think of this day when you were plotting against our Jun family? Didn't you think it was cruel when hundreds of thousands of soldiers died for the selfishness of this one man? When countless men were torn apart from their families, when families were ruined and their men died. Weren't you happy then? Weren't you happy? What right do you have to call me cruel? There are hundreds of thousands of orphans and widows in this world because of your wicked selfishness. Many men were humiliated to death. And many of those brave soldiers were made martyrs. Many heroes of this world were wronged because of you. Everything happened because you were stronger. You were stronger, right? Feck you. You're nothing more than trash. A mix of refuse. A bunch of green-haired CUC *olds. Do you like it when you watch your grandson under my feet, neither alive nor dead? Ha! Do you like it or not? You old bastard. You think your grandson will be enough? He isn't. Just wait. This will happen to all of your progeny. And trust me, you will start enjoying this once you have seen it often enough. Jun Moxie gave a loud, shrill, and mournful laugh. An ominous light flickered in Xiao Buyu's eyes. He had already decided to take a decisive action. He had decided to take a decisive action against Jun Moxie. You're not far from here. Second elder. I have made arrangements to ensure that this man can neither see nor hear. He can't even use any of his limbs. But I will make him even more of a cripple. I will ensure that he can't even have children. I will make him into an object of ridicule. I will make completely useless. Jun Moxie looked up and gave a fierce roar. Blood dripped from his sword as he pointed it to the sky. Then, there was flash. And it was followed by a splutter of blood. Xiao Han's crotch spurted blood with that flashing sword. A lump of flesh flew and fell at Jun Moxie's foot. He kicked it straight into the air. This action of his covered the sky with blood and dust. Xiao Han had no strength to do anything. However, he hadn't died yet. In fact, it would have been much better for him if he had died a painful death than to be alive in the condition that he was presently in. The moonlight shone over the land. Everyone had gone silent with fear, their bodies were trembling, while their faces had gone pale. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 425. I'm not even close to being the demon that you are. The Snake King was known as the King of Poisons. And she was unusually fierce by nature. In fact, the Xian Beast King was sure that her viciousness wasn't inferior to anyone's. But even she had been left to tremble in this moment. In fact, her eyes had clearly belied the fear of her heart. Such a cruel punishment can exist in this world. This man is so cold-blooded and cruel. Jun Moxie's heart is this cold. Is it made of iron or something? It's so cold and indifferent. He's so cold and unfeeling. He's so ruthless. However, it's true that such a punishment was deserved. The eyes of the white-clothed girl wouldn't have changed even if there had been a landslide in front of her. However, they had changed and become immeasurably deep at the sight of this. This one is very fierce. I've heard of the administering death by 1,000 cuts. And then, there's the case when 5 horses tear and dismember the culprit into 1,000 pieces. I'm sure that most people know of such fierce methods. In fact, many must have even dreamt of it, since everyone has some object of abject hatred that they would like to do all that to. But there would be a very few people who could carry out what's happening at this moment. A man is always a man. So, he would still have a limit to how much he can hate, and how much mental pressure his soul can bear with regard to such hatred. It could even be said that there wouldn't be anyone in a group of 10,000 people who would have had thought of doing something similar to this. Moreover, talking or thinking of doing something like this is one thing. But doing it for real is another thing in its entirety. A person who can do these things, and keep a straight face afterwards, is very rare. And that's because this entails something that is far beyond the capacity of a normal person's endurance. Who couldn't have talked about doing such ruthless things? In fact, many men may have spoken of these to their heart's delight. However, the number of people who would genuinely go ahead and do these things is very low. But Those who speak of such cruel and cold-blooded acts might possibly commit them in reality if the hatred accumulates to a profound level and breaks forth in a particular moment. But Jun Xie is following through this torture in a very methodical manner. And he's not even affected by it. In fact, he seems unaffected and uninterested. This is very rare. Just imagine, a normal person would frown at the thought of killing someone under ordinary circumstances. Their brows might even jump at it. But this is a real person, a real and living person whose individual parts are being cut away one by one. Forget about speaking about something like this, even imagining about it is unbearable for most people. The limits of Xiao Buyu's tolerance had been crossed even though he was a level 4 spirit Xian expert. His eyes had become lifeless as he looked at that lightly breathing lump of flesh on the ground. It seemed like he had been struck by lightning. He was thoroughly dumbfounded and stunned. How could he have known that Jun Xie would be so bold and ruthless? How could he have imagined that this youngster would leave no room for mercy? And Xiao Buyu wasn't the only one. There were many other Xian experts who were standing in the field. Many veterans who had grown accustomed to many a bloody scene were also present. All of them had held their breaths at the sight of this scene. So, there was pin-drop silence in the field at this time. Then, there was the Silver City's Princess Han Yangmeng. She wasn't very strong on a psychological level. So, she had only been able to cry and, oh, before her eyes had rolled back. And she had then fainted in Mu Shuetong's arms. However, there was another person who would have been overjoyed at the prospect of fainting. And this individual was that lump of flesh that still hadn't stopped wriggling on the ground. The nearly dead Xiao Han desperately wanted to faint. In fact, he wanted to die. After all, that would put an end to the pain. The pain was very excruciating. But death was a great luxury for Xiao Han. In fact, he couldn't even dream of passing into a coma. The faces of the other 5 elders had turned red. But they hadn't moved an inch ever since they had been enveloped by that vigorous murderous aura. Instead, they had vainly gnashed their teeth, and had opened their eyes wide enough to crack their sockets. They had presumed that such a strong aura could only have come from some mysterious and uniquely skilled person. In fact, they had believed that it had been unleashed by that mysterious master who was backing the Jun family. So, they knew that they couldn't act or interfere at this point. After all, they believed they would enrage that mysterious master if they acted. And he would kill all of them in a strong retaliation if that happened. In fact, they felt that it would be as easy as waving one's hands for someone as strong as that mysterious man. It was what one called, not too close and not too far. That powerful retaliation would come for them if they acted out. But it wouldn't be from the mysterious master who was backing the Jun family. Instead, it would come from the white-clothed girl. He. Suddenly, a mild yet lofty chuckle echoed in that deathly silence. Everyone followed the sound of the laughter to its source. The source's expression was quite indifferent and tranquil. In fact, he had an affable smile on his face. His body stood straight in a heroic manner. It was Jun Xie. The one who was laughing was unexpectedly Jun Xie. He was laughing even at this moment. He had just orchestrated that exceptionally brutal atrocity. However, he was still laughing like nothing had happened. This is very good. Jun Xie looked at Xiao Buyu in an amused manner. Do you at Xiao Buyu? That feeling one gets by slowly cutting the body of a man he hates the most, it's extremely wonderful. In fact, the term wonderful isn't enough to describe that happiness, particularly when the man's name is Xiao Han, and my family is called the Jun family. Xiao Buyu had stood motionless like a rock until this time. However, he had started to sway now. He gave an unwavering look to Jun Moxie. A strange sound came out of his chocked throat. Oh, oh, oh. But he was unable to speak anything in the end. You needn't speak. I understand how you feel. I can even show you my understanding and express my sympathy, my heartfelt sympathy. Jun Moxie gave a long sigh and said, after all, he's your flesh and blood. He's your kin. Seeing your kin die in front of yourself must be a huge tragedy. I'm sorry. No, that doesn't sound correct. Does it? I'm very sorry. I had spoken it wrongly the first time. But I will surely pay attention next time. Jun Moxie then tried to change the topic. Ahem. No. I find that I've truly spoken wrong. You see, I was very happy and excited a moment ago. So, I had spoken incorrectly without paying attention. You shouldn't take offense. Haha. Ahem. In fact, you should be thankful to me. Xiao Han is surely crippled, but I've still allowed him to live. So, it means that this isn't like watching your kin die. You tell me. Aren't I right about that? The young Master Jun rubbed his hands and continued in a slightly embarrassed tone. Moreover, he still can't be called a complete cripple. After all, I still haven't crushed his spine yet. My heart has a soft spot for this man. My compassion for him didn't stop for a moment. And that's why I could do my job properly. I hope you don't dislike that. Also, I can fix my mistake and cripple him completely if you want that to happen. I promise that I will not leave you dissatisfied. Again, I would like to apologize to you again. You're a demon. Xiao Buyu's lips trembled with indescribable grief. A demon. I'm not very fond of those words. You really flatter me if I were to be honest. But I genuinely don't deserve those words. Jun Moxie shook his head in disagreement. You should consider changing them a bit. Because I am no demon when compared to the Xiao family. He raised his sword as he spoke. Then, he pointed it downwards. Xiao Han's blood dripped off at a fast speed as a result. And the sword got restored to its original state in the blink of an eye. I have finally understood what a true divine weapon is. To kill millions, yet not be stained. I had always thought that these were empty words. Hee hee. I've finally found that such a weapon genuinely exists. This is a good sword. It is a very good sword. Jun Moxie sighed while speaking. His words made everyone tremble. Killing millions yet not getting stained. Second Xiao Elder. I know that you're only pretending to be on the verge of a collapse. You're storing up energy in reality. I know that you eventually wish to make a move to kill me. After all, you have already decided to kill me today. You are even willing to ignore the consequences. Isn't that right? Jun Moxie smiled wholeheartedly. That's kind of obvious, isn't it? But you have been injured, and your spirit has suffered as well. So, do you want some more time to prepare? Let me ask you this while you do. Do you know about the Donghua Hall? Second Xiao Elder. That Hall of Hell. Donghua Hall. The Hall of Hell. Jun Wuyi's eyes opened wide and started to sparkle brightly. He would never forget that night when he had burst into that hall with Jun Moxie and had witnessed that extremely miserable human atrocity. In fact, he would tremble with wrath every time he would come to think of it. Xiao Buyu looked at Jun Moxie with extreme hatred. He made a supreme effort to summon his power, but failed at it. I'm the man who's responsible for the destruction of the Hall of Hell. Isn't that quite unexpected? The bright light which had belied Jun Moxie's previously merry state had been wiped clean by now. In fact, it had been replaced by a cold ruthlessness. The murderous aura in his voice increased as he spoke. Everything seems to be an accident. My plan was very simple when I had acted against the Hall of Hell. I only thought that it was a brutal money-making organization at first. But then, I became aware of the training that was given to prostitutes inside Tianxiang. And I realized that I was wrong. In fact, I was completely mistaken. That's because those lowlives who force women into prostitution and traffic children aren't half as inhumane as the people behind the Hall of Hell. In fact, they are incapable of doing the tasks that were required of them at the Hall of Hell. After all, they usually sell of the girls and boys who don't look attractive. Perhaps they start training them to do odd jobs or become flesh traders themselves. In any case, even child traffickers have enough conscience to not break children's limbs and spines, and then put them in jars, to raise deformities. Such a thing could only be done by those conscienceless savages of the Hall of Hell. No one else had ever been able to do something like this before them. So, I was left baffled. And I started to wonder about those things. I wondered what kind of deep hatred must the owner of this establishment have for those children to have come up with a scheme to poison their lives so badly. Those children obviously couldn't have provoked the owner of the establishment. So, there was only one other angle left. What kind of hatred would the owner of the hall have towards those children's parents to deal such a heavy hand to the young ones? My grandfather and third uncle were talking about the past one night. They mentioned about the troops who had served under them in the past. But not a shadow of some of these troops had been seen for a long time. They may have been disheartened because of the past. But shouldn't they have come to their old lord's house once in a while? Shouldn't they have let their old lord know that they're still alive and happy? Jun Moxie started to tremble when Jun Moxie reached this point in his speech. Jun Moxie could clearly remember that day when he was talking with his father. He could remember that feeling of disappointment, a strange sense of great loss, and nostalgia. However, he had vaguely guessed something from the tone of Jun Moxie's voice. And his eyes had become red as a result of this comprehension. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 426. The Spirit Xian Expert Falls Apart. There is an old saying about what to say. The speaker has no particular intention of speaking something, but the listener reads their own meaning into it. So, I started my own investigation. And I started to look into the troops that had served under my father during that time. What were they doing right? Where did they live now? Half a month of investigation was conducted. And I was informed that those men had disappeared mysteriously along with their wives and children at one point of time. So, I continued with my investigation. And I checked every case that had gone without leads at that time. And I found that there had been countless murders where the evidence of the homicide had been erased. These murderers had left no clues behind. So, the authorities couldn't make a proper case out of them. Moreover, those corpses had also been in the same condition. A person couldn't even identify them properly. The only thing that was similar was that those corpses weren't of aged people. Moreover, there were no children amongst the list of the deceased. Jun Moxie's voice was filled with grief and savagery at the same time. Therefore, I became suspicious after a time. Who was behind this hall that had been ill-treating those children so badly? It was possible that those kids were the orphans of those soldiers. But This meant that it was possible that those children had suffered so much because their parents had been involved with the Jun family. And this also meant that the person behind the Hall of Hell must have harbored deep hatred towards my Jun family. But then, who could this hidden enemy be? Who could it be? Jun Moxie's eyes met Xiao Buyu's aggrieved gaze. And the young Master Jun's eyes also started to become fiercer. He took a step forward as he glared at Xiao Buyu and asked in a serious manner. Second Xiao Elder. I've heard that you're the one with the most wisdom inside the Xiao family. So, can you tell me who the person behind the Hall of Hell is? Who is it? Who can be so devoid of humanity? Who can have such hatred for our Jun family, that they are willing to take out their hatred on innocent lives in such a maddened way? Second Xiao Elder. Tell me, who is it? Jun Moxie took another step forward as he spoke. His cold and murderous aura became stronger with each step he took. And his glare slowly became razor-sharp as he looked at Xiao Buyu. Xiao Buyu finally looked away since the young Master Jun had continued to glare at him. Unexpectedly, the old man couldn't meet his gaze anymore. In fact, Xiao Buyu was unconsciously taking a step back with every step that the young Master Jun was taking forward. Moreover, his mannerism had seemingly become anxious and perplexed. The spirit Xian expert was feeling ashamed and perplexed by Jun Moxie's questioning. Each step of Jun Moxie's resembled heavenly thunderstorms to Xiao Buyu's ears. In fact, his heart had also started to beat at the rhythm of Jun Moxie's feet. How would this old man know? What ridiculous mystery do you speak of? Xiao Buyu asked angrily. But his voice was trembling. Any man with a little knowledge would find it odd if the voice of a spirit Xian expert were to tremble like this. I had only suspected it before. But then, Xiao Han came to the Tianxiang city sometime after I had dealt with the Hall of Hell. Moreover, he had seemingly taken the initiative to look for my third uncle in order to give him trouble. Why did he arrive so quickly at such a fortuitous time? Can you answer this question for me, Second Xiao Elder? Are you suspecting me? How could this old man have done such a thing? What evidence do you have? Xiao Buyu's voice trembled as he shouted loudly. I do suspect you to some extent. But you are a person of great fame in the Silver City. So, you won't be able to pull off such a thing. However, there were so many murders, and so many cases without evidence. It would have been fine if there had been a couple of cases where no evidence had been left behind. But so many of such clueless cases was worth a closer scrutiny. And what kind of a power would have the capability to push down so many cases? And evidence? You're asking me for evidence? You want proof? How would a man who is determined in his heart leave any proof behind? Jun Moxie smiled in a strange manner. However, I have another thing now. You see, there's a new suspicion in my heart now. Why did you ask if I was suspecting you instead of asking me if I suspected the Xiao family? Or maybe, you should have asked me if I suspected Xiao Han. The wise and far-sighted Xiao Buyu must clearly remember that I had specifically indicated toward Xiao Han. So, why did you pull it to yourself? This is such a lucky stroke. You're confessing without even being pressed. Xiao Buyu stumbled and staggered back again. His brows were dripping with sweat. Utter nonsense. You have no evidence. Those empty words from your teeth are aimed to entrap an innocent man, to entrap the Xiao family. What evil schemes are you harboring? You're mistaken again, Second Xiao Elder. I had clearly mentioned Xiao Han alone. When did I ever entrap the Xiao family? What logic is this? Does Xiao Han represent the entire Xiao family? Jun Moxie pressed hard with each step as he pursued his retreating enemy. His eyes also flashed with an increasingly bright and divine light. And Jun Moxie's methods had been producing results till that moment. Xiao Buyu's mind was in confusion. He no longer had the determined mindset of killing his enemy. First, Xiao Buyu had been involved in that annoying fight. Then, he had to face the solitary falcon's attack, and had sustained an injury in the process. Then, Xiao Han was brutalized in front of him. And then, the inhumane hall of hell was mentioned to him once a nick in his mental defense was exposed. Consequently, the Xiao elders' mental defenses had been smashed in their entirety. Jun Moxie, you're a slanderous liar. Are you saying that you have evidence against my Xiao family? Your tongue is like a knife. You've put these criminal accusations against the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family. Xiao Buyu's face was flooded with sweat. His facial muscles had started to twitch and twist like crazy. Evidence. I've already told you many times that I don't have any. I only have suspicions. And my suspicions are enough in this case. Jun Moxie's eyes were like a cold knife. Xiao Buyu, do you still think I will need some bullshit evidence at this stage? Who in this world has the power to keep such a matter under wraps? Who has the power to push down such cases? And who has such deep hatred towards my Jun family? The young Master Jun had spoken the last words in a low voice so that only the very few near him could hear it. Consequently, Jun Wuyi's face twisted into an extremely fierce and terrifying expression. These pointers were merely speculative in nature. And Jun Moxie had admitted to that as well. But these speculations were very reasonable. And each of these speculations had only pointed to one direction. Jun Wuyi's tiger-like eyes overflowed with tears. He desperately wanted to fly back to the Tianxiang city so that he could lovingly find a place for those children to settle down. Do you know? I had received a small payment by a little girl some time ago. And I had pledged to destroy the Hall of Hell in return. The image of that helpless little girl sprang up in Jun Moxie's eyes. He could see her younger brother's little dead body. And the way she was trying to reach out for him. And that broken copper coin. So, it's obvious that I will do the job since I had received the payment. Jun Moxie then continued in a ruthless manner. Be at ease, Xiao Buyu. I won't kill anyone from the Xiao family. I will merely cripple them one by one. I will cut off their tongues, noses, and ears. I will break their teeth. I will destroy their manhoods, and break their spines. Then, I will stuff them in jars till they grow old and die. I will let the world witness what kind of lowly people they are. I will let the world know where the road of savagery leads to. Do you like my plan? You dare. Xiao Buyu looked confused as he stepped back. Then, he gave a severe roar. You dare. But his voice couldn't help but feel weak when he saw that everyone was looking down on him with disdain. His roar no longer had the deterring effect it used to in the past. The mind of the level 4 spirit Xian expert had been defeated by Jun Moxie even though he was nearly as strong as a great master's. The old man hadn't been associated with the Hall of Hell very directly. But that didn't mean that he was absolved of all guilt. It was because Xiao Han, his grandson, had been involved. Moreover, none of those atrocities would have ever taken place if Xiao Buyu hadn't supported his grandson's cold-blooded reprisals at that time. Everyone has a dark side to them. One can try hard to hide it. And one can attempt to seem falsely perfect by pushing this dark side deep down. However, This darkness would eventually be open to the world once the lid that covers it is lifted. A man can be extremely contemptible. And a man may be well accomplished, or even phony. However, no one can face and bear the truth of their dark side. Xiao Buyu fell apart. His spirit and body didn't have any strength to retaliate. The third, the seventh, and the ninth elder had different expressions on their faces. One looked ashamed, one looked on with hatred, and one looked resentful. The eyes of the seven swords were full of disgust. They had never dreamed that the Xiao family could ever be involved in such frenzied savagery. Han Yen Meng had also woken up by now. She couldn't help but tremble when she heard what had transpired. Even she looked at the Xiao family with disgust and loathing now. Any person with any sense of conscience wouldn't be able to stay indifferent if they had heard about such brutal events. Anyone who couldn't see the clues after Jun Moxie's repeated questioning and Xiao Buyu's subsequent reaction could die and go to hell. Xiao Buyu. How did the Xiao family's members infiltrate into that army of millions? Tell me. I'm sure you know. These words came out of Jun Moxie's mouth at a time when everyone was thinking over this topic, and Xiao Buyu's mind was in a troubled state. Who is that hidden traitor? This shout was even louder. It was the result of the accumulated energy from the entirety of Jun Moxie's body. This loud shout was purely comprised of spirit energy. In fact, it had sounded like the roar of the legendary lion. Even the burning torches had been left to flicker because of it. Everyone had felt a loud explosion in their minds, while their hearts had been startled. Their cultivations had started to seem meager, and their minds had become fuzzy. The events of the past had started coming back to them. Xiao Buyu trembled as he bore the brunt of that. His eyes were brimming with a sense of loss at this moment. And he suddenly felt that he was standing in front of a dominating and extremely awe-inspiring supreme god. This god had asked him that thunderous question, and had imposed a sense of pure dominance over him while doing so. And this had incited an involuntary reaction in the depths of his heart. He felt that he couldn't defy those orders. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Mother, Chapter 427. The Great Spirit Deterrence Method. There was silence all around. Jun Moxie's shout had sounded like a loud gong from the heavens. And it was like a thunderous explosion for Xiao Buyu's ears since his heart was already unstable at this moment. Jun Moxie had asked Xiao Buyu about the Hall of Hell in a very sharp manner. But the Xiao elder would subconsciously do everything to resist even though he had suffered a violent attack. And he wouldn't be swayed very easily. After all, Xiao Buyu was a level 4 spirit Xian expert. So, his reply would be extremely quick even if his mind had fallen apart. Therefore, it would be very hard to bring him to such a state of mind. However, Jun Moxie had exploited that matter thoroughly, and had breached the abyss of Xiao Buyu's spirit. He had then taken another shot to attack his opponent's innermost core, and had caught him off guard once again. Xiao Buyu's mind was in complete chaos. And he unintentionally muttered, "The hidden traitor?" However, Jun Moxie's voice suddenly changed at this moment. And it became gentle and kind. In fact, the voice was full of magnetism, like a mother who was doting on her infant. It was piercing and full of vigor. The young Master Jun's expression was grand, and seemed to be issuing a fantastic and bright light. He looked Xiao Buyu in the eyes, and slowly asked, "Who are the people you had used to infiltrate the Jun family's camp? Who are the ones who had assisted you in assassinating Jun Wuhui and Jun Wumeng? Who are they? Tell me who those people are." Xiao Buyu's weak gaze met with Jun Moxie's glare. Then, they began to struggle in a violent manner. But it seemed that the light from their eyes had gotten connected and wouldn't disconnect again. The Xiao elder's eyelids started to droop and remained as such for a long time. Then, they suddenly opened up again. However, they seemed somewhat vacant now. Those men. I had heard that there were several red-clothed masked men. Xiao Buyu's expression had become very relaxed. In fact, it seemed as if he was talking in his sleep. I later learned that they were from the Blood Sword Hall. They assisted our Xiao family by going in first. They even made the arrangements on their own. Both sides had the same aim. So, we hit it off from the very beginning. The men from the Blood Sword Hall, them. But, why did they help you? Your aims were the same. They were also against Jun Xie. Or the entire Jun family. Or, was there another person who was inciting them from behind? Blood Sword Hall. A sharp light flashed in Jun Moxie's eyes. But his voice was still as gentle as a warm breeze that blows across treetops. In fact, anyone who heard him talk felt extremely comfortable and warm inside. The voice of this man could make a person feel so safe and comfortable that they would wish to go off to sleep. And the one who had to bear the brunt of it was Xiao Buyu. His heart faltered even further. And his expression became that of heartfelt ease. He had seemingly forgotten the grief and indignation. And the shame and the dishonor he had suffered a moment ago. It was the Great Spirit Deterrence technique. And it had been blended with hypnosis. This was the extreme combination of modern hypnosis techniques and the great ancient spirit deterrence method. And Jun Moxie was successfully employing this combination in this instance. Jun Moxie had taken advantage of Xiao Buyu's nervous breakdown and had opened the innermost doors of his heart wide. Then, he had entered as swiftly as lightning. A base-rank Sky Xian expert had managed to hypnotize a level 4 Spirit Xian expert. This was a miraculous technique. And this world had never seen something like this. He had attained wonderful achievements that had never been seen in his generation. And that too in one fell swoop. Everyone had an expression of amazement on their faces. A light of astonishment flashed in the eyes of the white-clothed girl. She looked at Jun Moxie in a way that made it seem as if she had started to harbor a strong desire to understand that miraculous youngster in a comprehensive manner. This unheard and unwitnessed miraculous technique had even left someone with her accomplishments to feel battered and shocked. I don't know why they did it. Our Xiao family had already made proper preparations for a force to attack at that time. We hadn't even expected them to reach out on their own. But we came to an instantaneous agreement since our goals were the same. And everything went without a hitch after that. Xiao Buyu's face reveled in a childish pride. However, his eyes were still empty. We couldn't find a single trace of theirs after that. The people who would go into the camp to provide support were different every time. They were easy to identify at first. But we would never see them again once their job was done. The Blood Sword Hall had presumably arranged for that to happen. Ah, the Blood Sword Hall doesn't leave any proof behind when they handles things. Hee. So, you don't know who they were? Jun Moxie nodded in an understanding manner as he spoke up in a mild and encouraging tone. Yes. Xiao Buyu's face had an expression of shame on it. And he hung his head like a child who had committed an offense. I hadn't participated in those operations. It was Xiao Han and his brothers. I had only heard about it later. Then, his face showed pride as he spoke with hubris. What had to be done was done. Strength is the best argument. Besides, those ants were nobodies. They weren't worth my personal interventions. Ah, you're right. Good. Very good. Strength is the best argument. The blue veins throbbed on Jun Moxie's forehead. However, he controlled himself as he spoke. And the same people dealt with Jun Mou and Jun Wui later on? Yes, that was also them, the men from the Blood Sword Hall. Xiao Buyu didn't hesitate one bit. Tell me, who were the specific people who had participated in those operations? Xiao Han and his brothers. There must have been a lot of people, right? Jun Moxie smiled. His expression was gentle. Yes. How could a few people have pulled this off so quickly? We were dealing with an army. And the crisis was also big. I remember, it was Xiao Han, Xiao Yang, Xiao Zhen, Xiao Cheng, Xiao Guang. Xiao Buyu rolled out the names of 14 to 15 people in one breath. He then continued. We eventually made the despicable Jun family pay a heavy price. You must pay the price if you provoke the Xiao family. The price that was paid wasn't too small. However, Jun Wui had merely taken Xiao Han's fiancée. But you still took such a huge action. What was the need to make such a huge deal out of it? Jun Moxie firmly committed those few names to his memory. Then, he went back to ask another question. Just look at the troops who have come here from the Silver City. What is Xiao Han's status? Why does he have such a big influence? Why wouldn't we be overcautious? There's a great connection between all this. After all, the current lord of the Silver City doesn't have a son. He only has 2 daughters. The betrothal of the elder daughter and Xiao Han had been agreed to a long time ago. We hope that the younger daughter will also be married into the Xiao family. We have worked very hard for this. Our Xiao family will be able to rule the Silver City and the world at large in about a decade if both his daughters are married into our family. Our Xiao family's ancestor died for the Silver City. And it wasn't merely the case of a life being lost. He had the strongest Xian cultivation. He was also the lord of the Silver City at that time. Moreover, he was the first amongst those sworn brothers. So, it can be said that the Silver Blizzard City is based on my Xiao family's work. But the Han family became the lords of the Silver City after our ancestor died. Why? Our Xiao family has been pushed down for several hundred years. We are nominally considered as younger brothers. But we should be equal to them, or maybe even higher. That one baseless oath wasn't even worth a dog's fart. But it has deprived our Xiao family of everything that we have desired. Why? Xiao Buyu had a sinister expression on his face at this time. That repulsive Jun Wui arrived exactly when our plan was going to be successful. And everything that our Xiao family had been preparing for a long time had to be stopped midway as a result. Our Xiao family had been waiting for such an opportunity for hundreds of years. But this donghua Jun Wui had ruined that donghua Jun Wui, that donghua Jun family, dang them. They will pay the price. Whoever dares to ruin the Xiao family's plans must be destroyed. Xiao Buyu cursed in hatred. This was astonishing information. In fact, it was earth-shattering. The men from the Silver City suddenly found themselves struck by an emotional upheaval. The remaining elders, the 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 9th elders got divided into 2 groups in the blink of an eye. They were still shrouded by that dark and secretive imposing aura. So, they hadn't dared to make a move even if they had wanted to. But their behavior and expressions were clearly showing this divide. The 6th, 9th, and 8th elders were revealing anxiousness in their eyes. And they had expressions of terror on their faces. It was obvious that these 3 elders were members of the Xiao family. But the 3rd and 5th elders had a look of resentment across their faces. In fact, they had nearly started cursing. These 2 men were evidently from the Han family's side. However, Han Yan-meng was struck the hardest by this revelation. Her pretty eyes had opened so wide that they had almost reached her ears. She could have never imagined that those affable grandfathers and uncles from the Xiao family had been scheming against her Han family this entire time. Jun Moxie glanced around in a secretive manner. Then, he probed further. The Xiao family has genuinely planned far ahead. The arrangements have been quite exquisite as well. But does the Han family have no male progeny to speak of? The lord of the family doesn't have any son. But he must have brothers. Are you saying that even his brothers don't have any sons? So, why would they pass everything to the Xiao family? This is just your wishful thinking. Hee. We've obviously made these calculations since we wish to take control of things. Xiao Buyu laughed with self-pride and continued. We started to plan for these things after the birth of the Lord's second daughter. The Lord's brothers didn't exactly become crippled by accidents. You know. And that's far from the core of the truth. Moreover, there are many other elders and younger brothers. But we obviously know how to handle them as well. You must know about Xiao Han's Hall of Hell, right? Your entire Xiao family decided to start that venture, right? Jun Moxie changed the topic and asked in a harmonious tone. His forehead was already dripping with bean-like sweat beads. He had been expending a lot of spiritual energy to maintain that high-level hypnosis over Xiao Buyu. Jun Moxie's spiritual energy and cultivation was very profound. But it had slowly started to feel incompetent in the face of this task. Therefore, he had turned back to the Jun family's matter again. Moreover, Xiao Buyu's voice had become stable over the course of this dialogue. In fact, there were no signs of wariness from his subconscious at this point. No. Xiao Han and his brothers had initiated this matter on their own. In fact, it was too late by the time we got to know about it. So, we had no option but to follow them. A very few people in the Xiao family know about this matter. After all, this thing is too disgraceful, it hurts the very heavens. Anyway, those people were lowly nobodies. Moreover, the profits from that venture were rather great. Xiao Buyu's expression was quite contradictory, there were traces of remorse as well as avarice in it. No one had expected that this white-haired and ruddy-complexioned old man of such martial status and fame would be capable of thinking in such a narrow and filthy manner. Who would have believed this if he hadn't spoken it himself? Who would have dared to believe it? Extremely shameless. Well, you did well. I've decided to reward you. And it will be a huge reward. Jun Moxie's eyes blazed with a riotous flame as he spoke up in an easy tone. A big reward? What reward is it? Xiao Buyu's expression became extremely excited. It appeared like a child was looking at delicious and alluring candy. He desired it with urgency. Ah, you must do something before I reward you. You must jump and strip your clothes away. You will get the rewards after you finish the act. And you will be very satisfied with the rewards you get. A malicious light flashed in Jun Moxie's eyes. Jun Moxie would only need to twist his wrist to kill Xiao Buyu under these circumstances. But the young Master Jun felt that he would be condemned in history if he allowed this beast to get away with a clean and easy death. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 428. Extreme Humiliation. Jun Xie would only need to twist his wrist to kill Xiao Buyu under these circumstances. But the young Master Jun felt that he would be condemned in history if he allowed this beast to get away with a clean and easy death. Therefore, it was important that Xiao Buyu's death be remembered in the name of infamy. It was important that he left behind eternal ridicule to his name. In fact, it was necessary that this infamy wouldn't even allow his spirit to rest in peace after he had died and became a ghost. Even the sight of his ghost should bring laughter to the heart of people. It would be fine if others didn't get to see this. However, Jun Xie would still feel that he had done his best. After all, an evil man must die an evil death. Therefore, Jun Xie persevered even though he felt tired. A great reward. I'll have to strip. But I'm not going to jump. Xiao Buyu seemed bashful. This appearance was poles apart from the one of a world-renowned individual. About the striptease, twist your ass. And then take off a piece of clothing. After that, you twist it again. And take off another piece. Keep doing this until you're bare naked. Everyone will praise you for it. You'll get a huge reward at the end of it. You won't be disappointed. Go on, be obedient. Jun Xie spoke in a patient manner. His voice was extremely affable. However, his eyes had a touch of extreme malice to it. Ah! I want my reward. I will jump. Xiao Buyu promised obediently as he stood expressionlessly in front of Jun Xie. Then, the old man swayed his hips and twisted his posterior. After that, he jumped and started his striptease, under the gaze of thousands of eyes. This early 60s level 4 spirit Xian expert was a renowned individual. However, he was jumping and doing a striptease in a public place at this time. Jun Xie genuinely believed that this method should be enough to leave this profoundly respected elder so ashamed that he wouldn't be able to show his face. This insane form of humiliation for such a famous spirit Xian expert was a bit excessive even though he had killed someone's father and attempted to steal someone's wife. However, Jun Xie's conscience wasn't the least bit troubled while subjecting Xiao Buyu to such humiliation. His punishment fits his crimes. The clothes on Xiao Buyu's body gradually lessened as the flabbergasted crows looked on. His robe flew away from his body. His inner clothes flew out. His underarmor flew out. His trousers flew out. Yes. Yes. Move more flirtatiously, more tenderly, a bit more gently, a little more audacious. You need to be more aesthetic, concentrate on this. Be a little gentler. Turn your ass that way a little again. Everyone will be happier if you do that again. Dance to my beat. Tap. 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 Concentrate on this beat. This is better. You feel very rhythmic now. Jun Xie's face was covered with malice as he gently and delicately guided with the instructions. This white-bearded old man looked like an immortal figurine now. He had an enchanting smile on his face. His hand had gestured high in a pose, and he started behaving flirtatiously. Moreover, he was doing all of this in front of everyone. The old man then twisted his posterior in an eccentric manner. In fact, it seemed like he had a motor there. Only a tiny piece of underpants remained on Xiao Buyu's body at this time. His upper half had become bare naked a long while ago. However, he didn't seem to sense that mournful cold wind. Moreover, his facial expression was that of merriment. In fact, he was somewhat bashful, and somewhat covered in honor. It seemed as if he believed that erotically dancing and shedding clothes in front of the public was an extremely reputable and glorious thing to do for a man in his position. It had to be said that Xiao Buyu's body was extremely sturdy despite his age. He was covered in taut muscles, and there wasn't an inch of loose flesh on his body. His skin was like that of a middle-aged man. In fact, he could even give a youthful teenager a run for their money. He's taken very good care of it. The solitary falcon swallowed in envy. Xiao Buyu twisted his buttocks again, and removed that last piece of cloth from his body. His proud and unyielding rifle was standing unabashed in front of the world at this time. His manhood gathered a worldful of vigor in a moment, and shook its head in that dense underbrush. In fact, it seemed as if it was ready to run amok the countryside. SSS. The soldiers exclaimed in admiration as they looked on. They seemed to enjoying themselves. It's so grand and imposing. This is so admirable. It's unyielding even in the presence of so many people. He's a true spirit Xian. Hail the spirit Xian. Suddenly, there was loud a cry of fear. It had sourced from Han Yen Meng. She had covered her face and eyes. The little girl had never seen such a thing before. She hated Xiao Buyu, but she still couldn't help but make such an overwhelming observation at this moment. This shout had a very bad impact. Jun Moxie felt a strange unrest in his spiritual power. Then, he suddenly felt very dizzy and exhausted. In fact, he felt like his mind was being attacked. And his spirit deterrence technique got disconnected with Xiao Buyu as a result. Xiao Buyu's hand came to a stop as he was moving it to throw away that old underwear. Then, his eyes underwent a transformation and resumed cognizance. That spirit Xian expert suddenly became aware of his compromising situation as the cold wind blew over. And he stood dumbstruck for a moment. There were many people in the vicinity. Moreover, they had lit up torches since it was late. And the light from those torches were reflecting on his body. In fact, even an inch of his body was clearly visible to everyone. Even the 7 swords were glaring at him in hatred and indifference at this time. In fact, they had no shred of sympathy for him. The other elders were looking at his ashamed and pitiable face with anger. Only the people from his Xiao family were an exception to this. In fact, the 3rd and the 5th elders were glaring at him in a manner that made it seem as if they would move forward and slap him to death. Why has everyone betrayed me? Xiao Buyu was internally shaken at this moment. His mind raced, and he recalled what had happened. Then, every single dialogue that had taken place between him and Jun Moxie came to his mind. Ah, he bitterly cried out in fear. Xiao Buyu suddenly crouched on the ground, and did his best to use his hands to cover himself. But his hands were too small. So, he managed to cover the front, but he wasn't able to cover the back. The old man couldn't use his underwear either since he had torn it during the show. Moreover, everyone had already seen everything. So, there was no point in burying his head in the sand. His actions may have lightning fast. But how much could he have covered? Clap. Clap. Jun Moxie clapped his hands in a very cold manner. He gave Xiao Buyu a cynical look of unspeakable hatred. Then, the young Master Jun laughed out loud and said, "Good. Good. It was indeed a treat for everyone. They are very fortunate to have gotten a chance to appreciate such a peerless expert. The Silver City's Xiao Buyu holds the great position of the 2nd elder. But he jumped and did an erotic dance while shedding his clothes for these people. Isn't this a matter of privilege and pride? I'm sure that even a man who has lived up to 10 lives wouldn't have been fortunate enough to witness something this. Elder Xiao Buyu is the only person since time immemorial who has gathered the courage to do a bare-naked dance in front of thousands of troops. This young master genuinely admires such a level of art, commitment, and courage. The troops of the army had already heard about the wickedness of the Silver City's Xiao family. Therefore, they had begun to detest the Xiao family to their very bone. In fact, they abhorred the Xiao family. Therefore, the troops cried themselves hoarse and cheered loudly when they heard Jun Moxie's words. I never thought that the ass of someone so old could be so fresh. TCH. One person exclaimed. Is it fresher than yours? Someone else asked. But I'm nothing like this old man. He's an elder of the Silver City. He's also a spirit Xian expert. So, how is his ass so pure? It seems that he rubs it very frequently. Would it be that nice if he didn't rub it repeatedly? Rubbing one's skin again and again can even turn black skin to a whiter shade. Why would a man feel it with his hands so often? Isn't that a place one doesn't touch very often? An increasing number of people had started to join in. Ahem, ahem. How would I know this? Maybe the second elder was under pressure from living a hard life. So, it's possible that may have had no choice but to sell his ass for money. That makes sense. But, what time does the second Xiao elder open for business? I would like to become his customer. Bah! That old man is a level 4 spirit Xian expert. His fee won't be low. You think he'll do it free? Ask yourself, can you afford him? The status of a spirit Xian is astonishing. Ah! I can't afford him. But I think that the Xiao family would have loads of extra resources. So, they wouldn't have asked the Xiao elder do this thing for money, right? So, maybe he does it because he enjoys it. That sounds reasonable too. That must be it. How else could his ass be so good? You have good knowledge and understanding, my brother. That outstanding ass as genuinely tempted me after he twisted it and danced it out in such a saucy way. You flatter me. But I think that someone like the second Xiao elder would require us brothers at the same time. How could you meet his expectations on your own? The elder's Xian cultivation is excellent. I hear that he's the strongest man if you exclude the great masters from the list. He's excellent in that regard. A regular person can't meet his expectations. No man can. It's no small thing. So, you and I should go together. One should go from the top, and other should go from the bottom at the same time. We must go for a pincer attack. And I'm sure that we will eventually satisfy this elder. Good. Good. We might as well cut off some bamboos before we meet him. After all, there's a chance that we may have to surrender and lay down arms midway. So, we must prepare a stick in advance. He's strongest man if you exclude the great masters. Who else could tolerate that if he can't? Ah! That's a good advice. It's a good way of going about things. You're worthy of being the leader of the 3rd Battalion. Your weapon never strikes with uncertainty. We can surely serve this Xiao elder properly if we follow this approach. Ah, it's nothing. You're flattering me. My method isn't that great. And won't this elder look to create trouble for my family if I'm not able to service and satisfy him properly? Don't ever doubt that. He's very familiar with that road. In fact, that would be a walk in the park for him, ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha, and thus, great minds think alike. These were the uncouth fellows of the army. They would often harm others. So, how could they not harm their opponent? And those lacking in morality wouldn't refrain from fighting a battle of words, or making lewd comments about others. However, these words from those men made Xiao Buyu very mad. In fact, they left him in so much pain that he didn't wish to live anymore. Arg! Xiao Buyu looked upwards and let out a very loud roar. His expression was one of extreme grief as he suddenly stood up straight. His skin turned red, and the color continued to deepen with every passing moment. The elder's outer surface had started to blow up like an air balloon. And it was still expanding at a quick pace. Xiao Buyu moved unhindered throughout the world. But my fall has unexpectedly arrived. However, it has come in a shameless way by dancing naked in front of these small fries. I've suffered so much ridicule and hatred today. I won't forget this hatred, even if I am reincarnated. Xiao Buyu faced upwards and roared. He had a look of anger and a desire to tear everything apart. Thin wisps of red had started to flow from the corners of his mouth and eyes. Jun Moxie. Wait for me. I will turn into an evil spirit and look for you to avenge this disgrace. Xiao Buyu shouted in a miserable and sharp tone. Then, there was a loud explosion as his body burst. His blood filled the sky and disappeared with the cold wind. That terrible humiliation had made Xiao Buyu lose any love for life. Therefore, this powerful expert had committed suicide in an extremely terrifying way. He could have gone over to the enemy and could have taken some of them with him in that explosion. But he didn't do that. And that was because Xiao Buyu wanted to turn into nothingness as soon as possible. He wanted to end this humiliation so desperately that he couldn't even wait for one additional moment. So, he committed suicide the moment he was ready to explode. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 429. Keeping a promise. It's very weak. The tolerance is very weak. Jun Moxie had stood fairly close to Xiao Buyu when he had performed that passionate striptease a little while ago. However, Xiao Buyu had suddenly detonated his own body in suicide. Young Master Jun had been calm and collected in that moment, but he still hadn't been able to react in time. He had understood that Xiao Buyu had done this to free himself, and had no intention of killing anyone else. After all, the explosion hadn't contained any lethal force. But young Master Jun was still taken by surprise by that spray of blood, and it had ended up covering his whole face. Young Master Jun wiped his face and shook his head in a somewhat dissatisfied manner at first. He then said, he was an expert who was only second to a great master. How was he not able to endure that much, and killed himself instead? He was wasted all my plans now. It's a pity that we won't get to see those amazing buttocks again. Wouldn't we have wanted to see more of them? Dang it! I had planned that I would cut the skin of his great-grandson and pour mercury inside his body while he was watching. Or maybe I would have cracked his skull and boiled his brain. This excellent spectacle had barely started. And we hadn't even reached the best parts yet. But it's already over now. It happened so quickly. I wish he would have had more tolerance and strength to him. It's such a disappointment when you hear a lot about someone but they don't match up to their fame. Everyone who had heard Jun Moxie's words had the exact same expression on their faces. They all looked straight at him in rapt attention. Jun Moxie's remark had obviously implicated someone else who was present on the scene. Consequently, Xiao Fengwu's legs had been left to shake like the strings on an instrument. And his small face had turned deathly white. In fact, it was almost as if his face had been boiled in lime soda. The powerful and mysterious aura that had been covering the five elders disappeared at this time. In fact, this happened very suddenly and silently, and left no trace of its existence behind. The five of them obviously started to move about as a result. However, the five men separated into two clearly distinct groups the moment they were able to move. The three men from the Xiao family were left to face the two from the Han family. Moreover, the men of both groups were looking at each other with extreme hatred. The three elders from the Xiao family had some shame in their eyes, but not too much. The condition of the five men was quite similar. They were sweating profusely since they had been subjected to the enormous pressure from that mysterious aura. The sweat had soaked their clothes, and their faces also belied their exhaustion. It was evident that they had exhausted their energy while enduring that formidable pressure from before. And each of them felt weak at this time. But the five of them were still glaring at the other side. In fact, it was obvious that they were itching to take down those who had been allies and brothers a few minutes ago. The Xiao family is great. They make great schemes. They make great plans. They are great. The third elder was panting with anger. His eyes were also burning with anger. The lords of the Silver City have treated the Xiao family's members with utmost courtesy and respect. But they were nurturing tigers who would harm them in the future. Bah! It's useless to say that they were nurturing tigers. Tigers are meant to rule over the other beasts. We've basically been raising a pack of conniving wolves. How can people like you live in this world? The eighth elder tilted his head and snorted coldly. He then said, "What would you do, Han Fei Yun?" The third elder trembled in rage. He replied in a very blunt manner, "Your Xiao family started this. Yet, you ask me what I will do. I would have already found it impossible to live if I were you. In fact, I would have found the nearest tree, and would have hung myself from it. You are so devoid of shame, that you have bitten the hand that feeds you. You want us die? Han Fei Yun, you have no qualifications to wish for that. In fact, your Han family may not be able to win in the contest between our two families once we return to the Silver City." The eighth elder glared coldly and sneered as he spoke. "I don't have the qualifications? Let's test it out and see." The third elder's face twitched in a violent manner as he raised his palm and shouted, "Seven swords. Move into formation. Uphold the family's law. Take these Xiao family's rebels into custody." The seven swords moved in unison to deal with the three Xiao elders. The Xiao elders looked strong in their rebellion, but it was obvious that they wouldn't be able to last long. The complexion of the eighth elder and his companions changed very drastically in this moment. The contrast in their strength was obvious at one glance. These five elders had been forced to endure that insurmountable pressure a short while ago. Consequently, their spirit Xian energy was at 10 to 20% of its normal capacity. So, it could be said that they were at their weakest at this time. There was a clear divide between these five at this time. However, those three could still match their two opponents, and could even take the advantage. The seven swords were quite powerful together. In fact, an ordinary spirit Xian couldn't match them in normal times. However, their bodies had suffered injuries while fighting the great master solitary falcon. Therefore, the seven swords weren't guaranteed to arrest the three Xiao elders even if they united against them. However, the Han family had another ace up their sleeves, Mu Shuetong. This Sky Xian middle-rank expert's strength hadn't suffered any damage until now. Mu Shuetong was merely a Sky Xian expert on a normal day. So, he wasn't much in the eyes of these spirit Xian experts. But the circumstances had changed very drastically at this time. Consequently, this seemingly insignificant persona could easily turn out to be a trump card, and could play a critical role at the end of the day. Could it be that Mu Shui Tong would make the decisive blow in the Silver Blizzard City's civil war? Suddenly, an unusually mild voice echoed. It is hard to say whether they have enough qualifications or not. I have to say that the Xiao family's life isn't their own anymore. However, it doesn't belong to the Han family either. No one except for young Master Jun could have spoken in such a leisurely tone under such circumstances. Jun Moxie floated as lightly as his words did, and he suddenly disappeared in thin air. He then suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Fengwu in one quick move. Jun Moxie reached out and grabbed his neck. And then, young Master Jun returned to the spot where he had started from with a fluid and rapid move. He only left behind an afterimage of his hand grabbing Xiao Fengwu's neck. In fact, the only that had changed was the fact that he had raised Xiao Fengwu by his neck by now. The muscles of Xiao Fengwu's throat had become limp and pained out of fear. Jun Moxie had appeared in front of him like a ghost. In fact, the Xiao boy hadn't even been able to think of putting up a resistance. The 6th, 8th, and 9th elders suddenly became very anxious when they saw Jun Moxie grab Xiao Fengwu's neck like a butcher holds up a chickens before the slaughter. They frailly took a step forward. Jun Moxie. Every crime has a criminal to its cause. But Fengwu has committed no crime against you. Don't tyrannize the innocent. It was only natural that the 3 elders seemed anxious. The male line of the Xiao family was thinning. There were surely many youngsters in the Xiao family in Xiao Fengwu's generation, but there weren't many who were worthy. Moreover, Xiao Fengwu was the most talented youngster in his generation. I'm tyrannizing the innocent? This young master isn't even 17 years old. But your grandson is fast approaching 20, right? So, how could I be the bully? Every crime has a criminal to its cause. These words came out from the mouths of you Xiao family people. Don't you always take out your rage on innocents? Don't you always do whatever you feel like? Don't tell me what Xiao Buyu had told us about was orchestrated by him alone. Didn't you guys know anything about it? Dang you arrogant old men. Jun Moxie used his free hand to prick at his ear as he argued in a baffled tone. Jeering sounds from the crowd had been echoing along with his voice this entire time. Even the 7 swords were amongst those who were sneering. How many millions have suffered injustice because of your Xiao family's personal grudges? How many hundreds of thousands have died a violent death? And that's not even the end of it. You've even harmed innumerable innocent children. And now, every crime suddenly has a particular culprit to cause when you've faced a problem. Any man could speak those words for clemency. However, the men of the Xiao family couldn't. Jun Moxie gave them a cold and sharp look. He seemed calm, but he still emanated an icy murderous aura as he slowly spoke. I swore to Xiao Buyu that I won't let off a single man of the Xiao family. Those who can't be truthful shouldn't stand tall. And a young master from a good family mustn't break his promises. It's necessary for a young master to keep his promise. In fact, he can't renounce his promise even if he dies fulfilling it. The 6th elder trembled in rage at young Master Jun's mockery. He found it difficult to control his anger. In fact, he was about to roar and pounce forward when Jun Moxie smirked and there was a sound of something breaking. It was then that Xiao Fengwu screamed like a dying pig. Young Master Jun crushed his shoulder. No! Don't kill me. Don't cut my skull and pour mercury in it. I beg you. I beg you. Elder brother Jun. My great older brother Jun. Xiao Fengwu started to beg for mercy under the influence of the pain. The more he spoke, the more pain he found himself in. And this automatically made him more afraid in return. He suddenly shouted and started to weep. His eyes and nose were left streaming. It seemed as if he was willing to say anything out of fear at this time. The sixth elder paused for a second. Then, he roared in rage and fear. Jun Moxie, how can you be so despicable? Jun Moxie laughed loudly. Despicable? You have the nerve to call me despicable? You didn't think it was despicable when you slaughtered tens of thousands of men? You didn't think of the heavens' judgment when you crippled the children of the men who were loyal to us? So, how is it despicable when it's your turn to suffer? Could I do anything today that could be worse than what the Xiao family did? Xiao Fengwu's blood-curdling pitiful screams accompanied Jun Moxie's laughter. The sound of breaking of bones also ringed in the air as each one of the Xiao youngsters' limbs were crushed one after the other. In fact, his voice was brought close to a groan by the time each one of those limbs had softly hung down to his side after being broken. The sixth elder roared frantically and dashed forward. Jun Moxie saw the elder burst into motion. So, he grabbed Xiao Fengwu's neck by the nape and threw him forward. A crisp and sharp sound was heard as this happened. It was obvious that Xiao Fengwu's spine had been broken in that snap. Then, Jun Moxie followed Xiao Fengwu's flying body at an extremely quick pace. In fact, it seemed as if he was moving at a lightning-fast speed. The sixth elder was shocked by this, and he dashed straight towards Xiao Fengwu's falling body. He was about to reach out and catch him when he heard the blowing wind. And he quickly realized that Jun Moxie was rushing over from behind. The sixth elder had seen Jun Moxie's fight with Xiao Buyu. So, how could he not know the problems that Jun Moxie's amazing, demon-like, and magical moves could cause? Moreover, the elder's strength wasn't at its usual peak. So, he knew that there would be no way out for him. Thus, he made a prompt decision and decided against catching Xiao Fengwu's body. Instead, he dodged left and drew his sword. A hurricane of snowflakes filled the sky the moment he drew his sword. The old man had just drawn his sword and displayed the Silver Blizzard City's swordplay when he heard a loud bang and bang. It was obviously the sound of breaking of bones. Then, he saw that Xiao Fengwu's body had been sent flying at him once again. It turned out that Jun Moxie had moved into action and had kicked Xiao Fengwu again. However, these kicks had changed the direction of Xiao Fengwu's body and had redirected it back towards the dodging sixth elder. This kick had changed the direction of flight with perfection. Moreover, it had also broken Xiao Fengwu's lower back. Consequently, Xiao Fengwu's condition was only a step behind that of Xiao Han. In fact, it was only his face that remained to be dismembered. Xiao Fengwu had been completely destroyed. The sixth elder knew that he couldn't avoid the incoming body this time. Moreover, he had realized that Xiao Fengwu would be the first one to suffer the disaster in case he persisted with his sword attack. So, he had no choice but to restrain his attack in haste. He then grabbed Xiao Fengwu's body. However, he quickly realized the true misery of the youngster's body the moment he embraced him. Consequently, the old man couldn't help but shout in anger and fear, "How can you use such malicious methods, Jun Moxie?" However, he was left stupefied after speaking this. And this was a result of what he saw. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 430. The Stunning Sword Attack. The sixth elder was as a spirit Xian expert. He was fully aware of the soon-to-come attack from Jun Moxie. So, he had made foolproof preparations to face it. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Everyone else was prepared too. Jun Moxie's best option was to attack the sixth elder with his best strike at this time. However, he would have to retreat if it wasn't good enough. The eighth and ninth elders stood at a distance on the side. Their hands were on their swords' hilts, and they were prepared to provide support to their comrade if needed. Everyone had become wary after they had witnessed Jun Moxie's supernatural and unreadable footwork. Even the spirit Xian experts weren't an exception. In fact, even someone like the solitary falcon believed that he wasn't guaranteed to win against Jun Moxie's fast swordplay, even though he himself was world-renowned for his speed and agility. A mere base-rank Sky Xian should have been a small fry in the eyes of the spirit Xian experts. However, he had become far more important to them. In fact, he had been promoted to an expert on par with themselves. They had no choice but to be on the defensive. Not only were they very cautious, but they had also taken very careful defensive measures. Everyone could clearly see that Jun Moxie had stuck close behind Xiao Fengwu's falling body. In fact, they could even see his sword flickering with a cold light. However, Jun Moxie suddenly disappeared the next moment. He then reappeared behind the eighth and the ninth elders. The corners of his mouth curved in a cruel smile as a cold light flashed. The divine weapon. Blood of yellow flame. The silent and brilliantly shining sword suddenly swung at the eighth and ninth elders' legs. And it seemed as if a flash of lightning had shaken the world for a brief moment. In fact, that sword shone so brilliantly that no one who witnessed it being swung could resist its glare. And everyone was involuntarily forced to shut their eyes as a result. However, it had left behind a glittery radiance across the realms of world. The lightning had disappeared long ago. But it still remained in the minds of everyone even though they had closed their eyes. In fact, it had left the most unique and exceptional impact on their hearts. Then, the young Master Jun's body rose in the air like a soaring dragon, and disappeared in a flash. No one knew where he had gone off to again. The eighth and the ninth elders felt cold inside. They could feel that something was wrong. Even the white-clothed girl raised her head in confusion and pondered. That was because she couldn't sense where Jun Moxie had gone off to despite with her cultivation level. It was like he had suddenly disappeared from the world itself. There's no trace of him. Even spirit sense can't see him. How is he doing this? He used that mysterious move again. But I still can't glean anything from it. This can't be the skill set of a regular expert of this world. This is some immortal and divine move. The sixth elder was still holding Xiao Fengwu with one arm in a dumbfounded manner. He stood trembling for a good while before he called out, "Eighth, ninth, are you all right?" He had clearly seen Jun Moxie's sword light pass through the lower halves of both those men. But why hadn't either of them reacted to it? What's happening? The sixth elder didn't believe for a second that Jun Moxie had done that for show's sake alone. He must have had some purpose behind it. But why do the eighth and ninth seem completely unaffected? The eighth and ninth elders looked at each other in a confused manner. These two had reached the spirit Xian realm. But they were weaker than the sixth elder. Consequently, the sixth elder had recovered enough to push himself into action. However, these two were still feeling some weakness. Each of them inspected the other, and confirmed that there was nothing wrong. Then, they laughed out, and spoke up, "We're fine. That little bastard Jun Moxie is a mere Sky Xian brat. He only played a trick and made a bluff. How could he do something to us? However, they hadn't even finished speaking when their expressions suddenly underwent a drastic and tragic change. A piece of white cloth gently fell off from each of their thighs and exposed their legs to the wind. Consequently, they felt a slight chill since their bare and loftily legs stood facing the cold winds. The upper and the lower half of our robes were obviously made from one piece of cloth. So, why did the lower half fall down? Is it possible that he cut them off? They had barely begun to think of this possibility when they suddenly felt an acute pain in their legs. The two of them looked at each other in extreme horror. They then tried to move their bodies, but weren't able to take a single step. Their bodies made one move forward, but the top halves of their bodies fell down like a toppling tower. The blood spurted out from their bodies like a fountain. In fact, it appeared as if 4 columns of blood had violently splashed out in all directions. The two men gave out a sky-rendering howl of pain. In fact, their screams were probably heard from many hundreds of kilometers at a distance. 2 pairs of slippery and bare legs remained where the two men had stood a moment ago. They stood straight from the soles and up to the thighs like majestic stone pillars in lakes. They were stationary, but the apex of their thighs were violently foaming with blood. Jun Moxie had used his swordlight to cut the 4 legs at an inexplicable speed. And his blood of yellow flame was so sharp that the two men hadn't even realized that their legs had been cut off for a long time. Perhaps they had become aware of it a bit earlier. However, neither of the two men had believed it to be a fact. The entire vicinity slipped into deathly silence again. No one could have imagined this. Someone possesses such a speed. And someone holds such a sharp sword. The white-clothed girl sighed softly on the side. Her voice was so soft that no one could hear it. She was the only one who had seen Jun Moxie's swordplay in clear and proper manner. There had been nothing clever about it, nor had it been very ingenious. There had only been one unusual aspect about it: it was extremely fast. His speed had continued to increase until it had reached the pinnacle. Then, he had coupled the speed of his swordplay with the speed of his light footwork. And this had increased the speed of his attack even further. And it was then that he had slashed his sword. There's nothing that cannot be achieved. There's no speed that can't be beaten. And there's no speed that can't be attained. Everything can be achieved. And everything can be destroyed. Jun Moxie was a youngster who hadn't been a base-level Sky Xian expert for even 2 days yet. However, he had already crippled 2 Spirit Xian experts in front of so many people. The 2 Spirit Xian experts had surely exhausted a major portion of their strength. This held true for their mental strength and Xian cultivation alike. In fact, anyone who had been subjected to such high pressure would surely have their strength reduced very significantly. However, they were still Spirit Xian experts at the end of the day. And Jun Moxie had managed to inflict serious injuries to them, without them even realizing it. Their legs had obviously been cut off from their bodies. But they had still remained attached to the bodies for some time. In fact, even a single splash of blood hadn't splattered out. Whether it was the speed of the moves, the speed of the sword, or its sharpness, every aspect had reached a frightening level. 8th. 9th, the 6th elder roared with anger and despair. His eyes had become bloodshot. Xiao Fengwu's body fell from his hands as he roared. However, the 6th elder's trembling figure stood there dumbfounded. The Silver City had sent out a group of unprecedented strength for this event. Xiao Buyu had personally taken the lead of the group. He was a level 4 Spirit Xian expert. And he was also the strongest expert who wasn't considered a great master. the head of the Xiao family had sent 4 of its elders. And 2 more from the Han family had accompanied them. Thus, a total of 6 spirit Xian experts had moved out in one team. Then, there were the 7 swords. And these 7 experts could prove a match to almost anyone when they fought together. And the 2 sky Xian experts, Xiao Han and Mu Shuatong, had also accompanied them. Such strength would surely create a sensation no matter where it went. Would there be any force they couldn't dare to face head-on? However, such a formidable power had suffered repeated losses for some mysterious reason. In fact, they had suffered a ruinous blow even before they could retreat. Moreover, the Xiao family's forces had been thoroughly defeated by now. And the reason behind this had been a very trivial one. To its merit, Xiao Han had wanted to challenge Jun Wuyi for a fight. They had known that the Jun family had the solitary falcon's strength to support them. Therefore, they hadn't dared to underestimate the Jun family. However, they knew that they could beat the great master with their combined strength of 6 spirit Xian experts and the 7 swords. Jun Wuyi could have employed a sea of tactics, and could have put the numerical advantage of his troops to play in order to get away. However, how could a large force of ordinary men have dealt with the speed of spirit Xian experts? However, they could have never anticipated that Xiao Han would have become thoroughly crippled in the first fight. Then, Xiao Buyu had blown himself up in shame after Jun Moxie had exposed that despicable and shameless act of the Xiao family. They had lost every ounce of their reputation. Only the 6th elder remained at this time. And it could be said that he was besieged from all sides. The Jun family obviously wanted to sort him out. Moreover, even his own companions wanted to deal with him. He had truly come to regret it. Why did that mysterious person appear and confine the 5 of us? Would the Jun family have had enough strength to face the 5 of us spirit Xian experts along with Xiao Buyu if that hadn't happened? The 6th elder looked around in dismay. However, he only saw that the eyes in the vicinity were looking at him like he was some prey. The old man sighed upon this realization. Then, he pierced Xiao Fengwu's throat with his sword. It's better to be dead than to live a life of such extreme humiliation. There's no hope today. And barely holding on will be a greater tragedy. I don't have any chance of an escape. My 2 brothers' legs are also cut. So, they can't carry on like this either. The only thing that I can do is relieve their misery, and kill myself afterwards. Then, we will all go together on the road ahead. Ancestor, your children are incompetent. The 6th elder looked up to the sky, and cried out bitterly as tears flowed from his eyes. The concentrated sword light split into 2, and flew towards the 8th and the 9th elders. However, he had become absent-minded. In fact, he hadn't even realized that Jun Moxie had appeared behind him. Puff! A bright and shiny blade appeared from the inside of the 6th elder's chest. And it disappeared before the fountain of blood sprayed out. That sword attack had destroyed the 6th elder's bodily functions. The elder's eyes bulged as his body stood there. The split sword light he had sent went awry about halfway as his sword fell to the ground with a thud. Then, his body started to sway. The spirit of his life became chaotic in his eyes as he swayed and fell to the ground. The man twitched a couple of times before he became permanently still. Clinch, the divine weapon returned to its scabbard, and made a satisfied consonant. It seemed that it had eaten its fill, and was quite satisfied with its first battle's result. It had consumed the blood of 4 spirit Xian experts, and 1 sky Xian expert. The blood of these 5 lowly and despicable people had come as the first offering to the blood of yellow flame after its forging. Such an achievement was difficult, even impossible to believe. In fact, anyone who had witnessed it with their own eyes would have found it difficult to be convinced in their hearts. Jun Moxie still stood calmly at this moment. He then turned his expressionless face towards the Silver City's remaining elders and the Seven Swords. Then, he slowly spoke up. The grudges between the Xiao and the Jun family have been settled on this day. Do you have anything to say for it? This story will be continued to chapter 431. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.